Alden, I believe Alden's online. He was doing tours at Wolf Creek today. So I'm gonna try to run the meeting from here because it's really hard to run an in-person meeting from remote. So let's call the meeting to order. And let's go down and do the roll call. You ready? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. All right, Sonia Macy's. Tom Gray,
Here.
Doug Overton, Julie Baxter, Stephen Heekenmeyer,
Here.
Alvin Vandenbrink,
Here, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I can't get my camera to work and I've got other audio issues, so thanks for hanging with me, guys.
Ken Brenner,
Here.
Mike Hamblin, Sean Welder, Jay Sheehan,
Here.
Tim Winkler, Casey Green, Rebecca Breezemore, here, Callie Hendrickson,
Here.
Madison Muxworthy, here, Will Myers, Kent Vertiz, Frank Alphone,
Here.
Rich Thompson,
Here.
Jeff Comstock,
Here.
Doug Davis,
Here.
Doug Monger,
Here.
Jeff Myers,
Here.
Charles Whiteman,
Here.
Chris Collins,
Here.
Jennifer Holloway,
I'm here.
That's Will.
Bill Badaracca, Vince Wilczek,
He's here.
Vince's, T. Wright Dickinson,
Here via Zoom.
Pat O'Toole, Jonathan Bowler,
Here.
Jackie Brown. Okay, that's it, Steve.
Okay, so Katie, that is Julie.
Oh, great, thank you.
Do we want to go around the room? Ken, do we want to go around the room and yes, and have our guests introduce themselves? Okay. Thank you. I can't see.
We're gonna do introduction of people who are not.
I can't see past Rebecca, sorry.
Oh, so we have Holly.
Holly, Patrick.
Upper Yampa-Water, Allison Gould, Colorado Attorney General's office.
And Emily Zamack will be coming in and sitting in this seat. And then I'm Becky Mitchell.
Okay, Andy.
Andy Rossi, Upper Yampa-Water Conservancy District.
Okay. Welcome online. Yep, welcome. So I'm looking. So Amy's online. Ashley is online. Brian Romick.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Claire Solers is online. Aaron Light's online. Linda Sheehan is online. Jeff Rodriguez is online.
Yes, I got that.
Okay, Jennifer Holloway's online. Did you picked up Jennifer? Okay. Jenny Fritzson, Brendan Yampa's online. Robert Sakata is online. Hey, Robert.
Hi.
Russ Sands. Excuse me, Russ Sands is online.
Hey,
White River and Douglas Creek is online. Is that just you, Kelly?
Actually, it's Liz Chandler. I think Callie's on the phone.
Oh, okay. Correct. Okay. And I think that's it for online. So first order of business is to approve, modify the agenda. Has everybody looked at the agenda? Do we need any modifications for tonight's meeting?
I just heard an announcement from the Division of Water Resources.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Well, I'm sorry, what was that?
Brian, is there an announcement from the Division of Water Resources?
An announcement?
I can announce that, Ken. So this is Aaron Light. So through the legislative process last spring, the Division of Water Resources, Division 6 received approval for 2 new positions. One of them was a Yampa River Operations Coordinator position, and it's a higher level position here in Division 6. And just recently, actually today, Brian Romig accepted the offer to take that position. So Brian Romig is now our Yampa River Operations Coordinator. So he's going to be pretty much overseeing and managing the Yampa River, including the administration and all the water commissioners. So congratulations to Brian Romig in that promotion of his.
Congratulations, Brian.
Thanks.
Okay, so the questions on the table, do we want to approve the agenda? Doesn't sound like there's a modification.
Actually,
Oh.
we cut down the Big River and IVCC times, which is perfectly appropriate, Steve. And I was kind of expecting to see a specific task force update item there, and I don't really see that. Maybe Jackie wants to do that during her CWCB update.
This is Jackie. Sorry, my computer had to restart. I'm a little under the weather. That's why I'm not there. I'm happy to give a task force update whenever it works into the agenda. I was surprised to not see it there as well.
Actually, we
Yeah,
figured
Jackie.
that would be under item 6 where we got the Jeff, that's where I just kind of figured, sorry for not explaining that further.
Okay, so anyway, Jeff, you can just add it onto your numbers to item agenda number 6.
I've moved to approve the agenda as presented.
Yeah, sorry, just real quick. I just like to differentiate it because I'm not on the task force as a CWCB member, so it's not a CWCB update. So when you do the minutes, if you could just reflect that, that's fine for the time.
Okay,
You need a second on that?
we do.
I got it.
Okay. There's a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda for tonight's meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All, not in favor, say nay. Okay, motion passes, so we will run with the agenda. Next on our list is review and approve the August 12th, 2023 minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look at those? So I would take a motion to approve those if there's no discussion. No, a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Doug, a second by Jeff. Any,
Tom, not done.
oh, Tom, sorry. So any further discussion on the approval of the minutes? Anybody online?
I just have a question, just for my own knowledge and for when I posted on the CWCB webpage. We're talking about the July 12th minutes, right? Not the August.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, great.
Oh. You are right.
I'll make that change.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor and a second to review or to approve the July 12th, 2023 minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay. Minutes are approved. Public comment. 3 minutes per individual, 5 minutes per group. Did we have anyone? Oh, Ollie?
Yes, I just wanted to let everyone know that Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District will be hosting the second annual Yampa Youth Water Festival on Wednesday, September 27th at the Route County Fairgrounds in Dry Creek Park in Hayden again this year. We did invite every fifth grader in Route and Moffett County to attend, and if anyone would like to participate on behalf of the roundtable or on behalf of your organization, I would be happy to talk with you about that. So please feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you, Holly. Did we have anybody else show interest? No. Okay, anybody online? Okay, hearing none, we will move over to item 6, which is the budget report and CWCB updates. Jeff, you want to go first?
Can you all see that PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sounds good. So yeah, just a couple quick announcements here, and then I'll kick it over to Director Brown to talk about the upcoming CWCB board meeting and anything else that she wants to cover. So we're continuing planning the C9 Summit. We've locked in a venue. It will be held at the Westin Hotel in Westminster. And just for clarity and for reference, that November 14th is the Tuesday before the November CWCB board meeting. So we're hoping a lot of roundtable members can make it up for that. It'll be an all-day event, 8 to 5 on that Tuesday, and then there'll be dinner and a reception to follow, somewhere in that 5 to 8, 5 to 9 time frame. That little QR code in the corner, you can scan that and that'll take you to a form to RSVP if you plan on attending. If you're not planning on attending, also helpful for us to know that for our planning purposes, just to make sure we get enough food and drink for everybody. So that's that. So save the date. I'll send this out to Katie and Al to circulate around the roundtables membership list if you can't capture it right now. But there's that QR code again, so you'll have a little bit more time if you want to scan it. So a couple other reminders and updates for you all. The CWCB staff has been putting together a CWCB stakeholder guide. We previously referenced this in other meetings and updates to you all as the Basin Roundtable Handbook. It's going to take the shape of more of a guide to the roundtables, the agency at large, the IBCC, the board, and just kind of help new roundtable members and old roundtable members who maybe forgot all the, important pieces of legislation like 1177 and other things like that establish the roundtables in IBCC, but also point to other statutes that give the CWCB their board authority and things like that. So think of it as kind of a collection of information and resources for you all to help navigate, the roundtable process and all of that stuff. Just reminder, it doesn't take the place of any bylaws or anything like that. It's mostly just a collection of resources for you all to reference and, kind of a one-stop shop. Right now, all of our resources are kind of disparately spread across the internet, so they can be sometimes hard to find. And so we're just trying to consolidate all that information into a nice packet for you all. Couple other reminders. There's an upcoming WSRF deadline of October 1st. And also just wanted to remind you all, your annual WSRF allocations will be reflected on the basin balance sheet that we post on the WSRF webpage sometime after the September board meeting next week. I'm shooting for that week of October 2nd. I think I can make it happen, but it might be later in that week. If I don't get around to it, it's just a matter of how fast I can get to it, but it is my priority. So I'll try to make that happen as soon as we get confirmation from the board at the September board meeting. Other things, the wildfire ready watersheds and federal technical assistance and local capacity programs are still accepting applications on a rolling basis. I'll drop a couple of contacts for those two programs in the chat when I'm done here. Those funds are tied to the state's ARPA funding, so they have a spend by date of December of 2026, and they need to be contracted in full by December of 2024. So I'm going to keep mentioning them at all roundtable meetings until we either run out of funding or those deadlines pass. So just get ready to hear more about that. But and then just one other reminder that I mentioned last meeting, the climate change in Colorado report is set to come out here late this fall. I'll drop a link to their webpage in the chat as well. And there's some new charts and stuff on the webpage already, and the report will be there when it's released. But just wanted to give you all a heads up if you're interested in that. It's coming. And I think that's it for me. I'll let Director Brown touch on the rest of this. And certainly I'll stick around for any questions and things like that throughout the meeting.
Okay, Jeff, we did have one question at our PEPO meeting right prior to this meeting. We hadn't heard anything on the PEPO grants. Are those going to be decided at the September board meeting as well?
Yeah, so are you talking about the Basin Coordinator grant or any statewide PEPO grants?
Basin Coordinator.
Yeah.
Basin Coordinator.
Yeah, so I think for planning purposes, it's good to plan that those will track loosely with the September CWCB board meeting, because they are under, I think it's, in that 25 to 50K range. They do get submitted after staff review to the CWCB director. So there's a chance that you could see approval before the September board meeting, but that review time is, we use most of that most years. So yeah, you can expect them to kind of track with the September CWCB board meeting this year and into the future.
Okay, that's what we thought, but we just thought, well, we had John, we'd ask. So Jackie, do you have a CWCB, or is there any more questions for Jeff, I guess? Ken?
Jeff, would you like to embellish the C9 conference just a little bit to give people a little better idea of what else you're contemplating for this event?
Yeah, so great question, Ken. And thanks for all your help helping us plan this event as a member of that IVCC work group. I think, the general idea of the event is to really create some alignment or just, well, it's twofold. So number one is create the opportunity for cross-basin collaboration. I think, we've been hearing a lot at all the roundtables across the state that folks are kind of hungry for that opportunity. So we're going to provide that, through this summit and potentially do that annually if we can, and if we see like that it works and roundtable members are really enthusiastic about it. But the idea is to really create some alignment between the roundtables, the IVCC, and the board. For this particular C9 summit, we have a lot of things planned. We are getting close on finalizing an agenda, just need to lock in some speakers and stuff like that. So that's why I'm not showing it to you now, but we'll send that out as soon as we get it finalized. But you can expect, all of the topical areas that you all suggested through that roundtable survey. Oof, boy, back in March, April timeframe. But I think there'll be some breakout sessions that we're hoping to facilitate, to really increase that opportunity for cross-basin collaboration, and hopefully generate some ideas and some new solutions or innovative ideas for, the challenges that we face as a state. We have a really great structure here in Colorado with the Basin Roundtables and the IVCC and the CWCB board. You all are really fantastic resources for the agency and local experts. So going to give the people an opportunity to just kind of exchange ideas, talk about different things. I think that's kind of the majority of what we'll be doing that day.
I just add a little bit that the IVCC members, as well as the Colorado Water Conservation Board members, will probably be present as well. And it's a chance to really, we've all been working on the same thing here for 15, 20 years. Let's see what we can learn from each other and how can we increase our efficiency, and what lessons learned do we have. There's several very interactive sessions that are being considered that will allow us to not just listen to presentations, but actually interact with each other and see what we can learn from each other. And then there is a nice reception following that, which is a large window of time to interact. So I'm hoping that to see a full contingent of members from the Yampa-White-Green attend this event. So put in my personal bias here. I think this is something that has been needed for a while. We haven't had a chance to get together since 2019 because of the pandemic. So we think the timing is good. I think there's a lot of energy out there. Jeff and I have been presenting our position paper as an example at different roundtables, and so we had that chance, and we're hearing that same enthusiasm for interaction between the roundtables. So please put that on your calendar and see if you can make it. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, if there's no other questions for Jeff, Jackie, you want to do the CWCB update?
Sure. Okay, CWCB update. I reported last time we spoke that we have been working on an operational plan. So we've been taking a look at, we have a consultant engaged with us that has been coming to the board, and we've been just sort of talking about our roles and responsibilities as a board, and where we think there's room for improvement as a board, back out to the members of our water community and the state, and then where we think there's room coming back to the agency as well from water users and residents of the state. And the facilitator did reach out to the different basin roundtables and requested some feedback on that. So thanks to anyone that was able to have an interview with Greg or fill out a survey. and so last week, I want to say, or maybe the week before, everything's kind of melding together at this point. We had an operational board planning workshop, and we kind of went over some of the results from the individual board surveys and some of our considerations that we had worked on at our July board meeting. And, you know, started to narrow the focus on what it is we want to see changes on and where we think there's some clarifications needed. So that's been a really interesting process. I think after this September board meeting, we'll have a pretty dialed plan of what this is going to look like. It also, in addition to sort of a refresh on the board and our meetings and all the things I just talked about, will also offer the board, whatever its makeup is at the time, the opportunity to look at annual priorities and, you know, hopefully increase our ability to be nimble in reacting to, you know, meeting the moment and surprise issues that may come up, or things that we just are hearing from the community are important to work on in a more immediate sense. So we're trying to figure out how we can do that and what that would look like if we're able to do it. So it's been a really interesting process to be part of. As far as I know, I don't believe the agency has gone through this with the board before. So it has been just a really great look at how we serve and how we can do better and be the best board and agency we can. So that's been filling some time of late, and I'll be happy to report back on that if you're not able to attend the September board meeting and hear, you know, what's going on there. So as far as the meeting, as you all know, I'm pretty sure she's sitting there with you. Becky Mitchell has her new role as commissioner. And so we hired Lauren Riss as our director, and that's really exciting. I'm just really thrilled to have her in the directorship after Becky's moved on to bigger things. I wouldn't call them better necessarily. And she definitely has a different, I think, style of moving this board forward in the state, and the state issues that we have before us, and doesn't have to juggle the tasks of the other state that Becky was doing phenomenally. So we're excited to have, you know, a director that can look at the state and have Becky in that role as commissioner, which you'll hear about her goings on here soon. So anyway, with that, we are meeting next week, as you know, and we're, you know, we have a bunch of water plan grants coming through the door and water supply reserve account grants coming up. And then the second day is Thursday, and we are really kind of focused on Colorado River issues. And I think Becky will be there. Sorry, I don't know if you will be, but we're really trying to open up, you know, have more discussion, and put those things back to back, so that if people are wanting to listen in or attend a meeting, if it's in their area or convenient for them to travel to, that, you know, it's not interrupted with grants and, you know, the other business that we have that maybe isn't as interesting to some as some of those topics are. So that's something we're doing as well. And that is sort of my CWCB update as of now. Are there any questions on the information I've given you?
Any questions for Jackie here in the room?
Jackie, you were referencing all this work that you're doing internally as a board. Which day is that discussion going to be on?
Sorry, I'm just looking real quick. Afternoon of Wednesday at 2:35, right before we adjourn. So right after the Water Supply Reserve Fund applications.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's about an hour-long discussion.
Any other questions for Jackie in the room? Anybody online have a question for Jackie? All right, Jackie, can you kind of give us an update on what the task force is doing?
Yes, so the task force has now met 4 times. Wait, let me count them, make sure. 1, 2, sorry, 3 times. And the last meeting, I would say, is the first meeting that we really started to get into the meat of the duties of the task force. And for those of you who maybe missed the last meeting when I talked about this, I am serving on the task force as appointed by Representative Lynch as representative of industry with operations on the West Slope. And so I am there on the force, so to speak, as a tri-state employee, and that's my employer, Tri-State Generation and Transmission. So this third meeting, we really went through some criteria of how we wanted to make decisions, how we wanted our meetings to operate. I'll admit the discussion was a little bit clunky. But I think we sort of wrapped our arms around some of the things we needed to tackle in that area. And we will revisit, we sort of talked about it, and then we set it aside, and we will bring it back up and hopefully have a short conversation and agreement on how we will make our recommendations to the legislature and what criteria will guide us through that. And then how also we will, operate respectfully in the room when we're together, and, acknowledging that we don't all have the same priorities and the same thoughts and ideas. So that'll be sort of the first thing that we circle back on at this meeting. And then we will really get into, we'll have an update from the subcommittee, tribal subcommittee for 10 minutes. So they met, I think, just earlier this week, and they'll report back to us on, whatever they have to report out. And then we will chat about intra-state, current, and possible future tools. And so, this topic stemmed from our decision last week, and really helped us highlight, or 2 weeks ago rather, really helped us highlight, how we would get through these task force meetings and what topics we would assign to each day that we're meeting, so that we had some order, and we also could do some homework in advance and show up, ready and on the same page to discuss the item of the day. And so we decided to start with intrastate tools, and the method that was used to sort of collect those tools was that there was a Google spreadsheet that was, or an Excel spreadsheet that went around, and people added tools that they use. So, municipalities and agriculture and other entities, threw a bunch of tools into the spreadsheet and how they're used. And then there are also some, concepts that people put on there that could be future ideas. So we'll sort of discuss those. I'm not sure exactly, what that's going to look like. And we will use the criteria that we formulated to decide whether they are candidates for, the list of recommendations. As a side note, I think that it's important to understand, for all of us to be on the same page about the tools that we currently have. so that we know if the tools seem useful to people, if the tools need tweaking, if the tools accomplish some of the goals that the task force bill sponsors were looking for in some ways, but not in others. And so that's, kind of why we're taking this trip down existing tool lane. And, I think it's a really positive thing for us to do, to be on the same foundation. So that's going to make up the bulk of our meeting. And then we meet again on the 28th. This meeting tomorrow is in Grand Junction, and the meeting on the 28th looks like it'll be in Granby. And that meeting will have some of the carryover from tomorrow's meeting that we don't get to. We're expecting not to get through everything. And then we'll also talk some about interstate tools that exist now. And an example of that is the SCPP program. So we're imagining, since there's not a ton of existing interstate tools, that maybe we'll have room to wrap up intrastate. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm happy to answer questions as best I can. And anything else that you're wondering that I'm able to answer there.
Tim, just a quick question, Jackie, are you just doing a final report, or do you actually have bill titles?
We won't write legislation. So like these will be ideas that would be ripe for the legislature to consider. They would be recommendations. We won't be in charge of that process. And because there's no legislators on the task force, that will be something that they have to take up amongst themselves when that comes around, if there are ideas that are worthy in their opinion that come out of that.
Thank you.
Jackie, it's Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Could you give us an example of an intrastate tool that you kind of anticipate is going to be one of the ones tabulated?
Sure. So like an existing tool would be grass removal, the turf removal program. I'm going to pull up the spreadsheet. I had all this stuff up and then my computer restarted. So let me pull it up and give you a couple. So like an example of something that is not a current tool, but could potentially be an example of a current tool would be the New Mexico Strategic Water Reserve. That's something that the CWCB board talked about, a year and a half ago, as a possible tool. So it looks like, and in the spreadsheet, just to give you an idea, and this should be on the task force public web page too. I just haven't visited that yet today. There's 83 line items on here. So, the New Mexico Strategic Water Reserve is an example of something that someone, we don't know who, because they didn't put a name by it, is bringing back to the table and asking us to consider. There is a section called water banking, and someone brought up, Arkansas Water Bank as a tool that is a current tool that exists right now. Super Ditch is an example of a project that's utilized that water banking legislation. But that's only been done in the Arkansas. So maybe we bring that up and talk about why it's only been done in the Arkansas, and, what could be revised to accommodate additional water. Actually, that's water sharing. Sorry. So water banking, I don't think has actually been used on the Arkansas. That's a water sharing agreement, is super ditch. Shepherding is something that has come up a bunch, trying to provide the state engineer with more authority to shepherd water. So yeah, and then here in like the municipal world, urban agriculture, turf removal programs, municipal water efficiency, and gray water control programs, there's a bunch of this. Somebody's put something under education and outreach. Somebody's put something up that follows the water plan, action 5.5 drought resiliency toolkit, forest health improvements, in stream flow loan program. I'm calling these out, and also it should give you an idea of them, remind you of the membership of the task force, how varied the issues that they tackle as individual task force members are. Soil moisture, on and on it goes. So I can certainly link to the public site. And you can check this out, for yourself, or YouTube the task force tomorrow when it's the public Zoom link when it's up there. Do you want me to throw that in the chat?
Yeah, that'd be great, Jackie. Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to drone on about it. But there just are a bunch of current tools, and obviously the big glaring one is demand management. So that's on there as well, right?
All right.
Okay, I'm gonna put that up there. Anything else?
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask for questions for.
No, I don't. Jackie answered all the questions really well, but I did have a question on it, and I was gonna visit with Jackie today on the phone, but we kept getting cut off and we couldn't finish our conversation, so sorry, Jackie. But I just wondered, she brought up the last item, as far as demand management or whatever. Do we, as a board, submit the white paper that Jeff and Tom put together and show a force of, because I think in this task force thing, the roundtables have kind of got left out. And to me, the roundtables were help to advise. So do we submit that white paper to the task force and say, hey, we're out here, we're the roundtable. We've already got some stuff started on this. Or is it too early, Jackie, to do something like that? I'm throwing that out there is all I'm saying.
Yeah. There's a lot of Mike hasn't been able to, I'm assuming that's Mike Camblin. And he's been otherwise engaged and hasn't been able to attend the last 2 task force meetings. And Mike, as task force members, we're not actually allowed to talk about the task force, you and I on the phone. So I'm glad we kept getting cut off so that I can honestly answer this question for you without having previously broken Colorado open meetings laws. But the white paper, we've gotten a paper from a collaboration of environmental nonprofit organizations. We received a letter from the bill sponsors. We received a letter recently from agriculture, which had like Farm Bureau, Cattlemen's. I think I've got it pulled up here still. All those are going to the website. So I guess that's all to say, like, certainly you can. It's such a short-lived task force that I personally, just after the last meeting, felt like it was pretty cool to have the public comment come through. So I guess what I would say is if somebody can and is willing to attend the public comment portion of the task force meetings, that's probably just as valuable, if maybe not more valuable, than inundating task force members with a bunch of different white papers, right? I mean, that's sort of intimidating, and I'm just giving you my honest opinion there, is that I would rather hear somebody talk about why the things in the white paper are important than, you know, just kind of receive white papers from all over the state. And that's fine if that's how it goes, but I think it's more impactful to hear the voices. So either way. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, so in other words, you guys all need to carpool to Grand Junction tomorrow.
Granby on the 28th.
Pretty Granby on the plane, or jump on Zoom, they'll have public comment on Zoom also, so.
Well, thanks for
Okay.
both of you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any more other questions?
I
Online?
see that, yeah,
Yeah.
I see a few online.
Steve,
Doug, go ahead.
yeah, so
Steve-
I'll be
Steve-
brief here.
Zero.
Jackie, thank you for what you're doing. You're doing a great job. I've watched the meetings on video and the rest. I'm a little depressed about the concept of no action being a viable option here, and that we, you know, we're being run into a corner here, and then we still are not out of compliance of the compact and the rest. And then when we started talking about the intrastate, the inside the state conversation, I mean, you know, and we're still worrying about the water grabs from across the basin as well, across the continental divide. So I'm very concerned about all that. And then Kevin Ryan, the state engineer, was the only one that kind of said, well, you know, maybe no action might not be such a bad idea. And it seemed like nobody at the roundtable meetings had any of that concept together and had any so it would seem like it was ruled off, and we're having the press and the papers take over our public policy right now. And so, you know, and I don't know. I'll shut up. Thank you very much.
What, I guess I just have a question, Doug. So I'm a little bit confused. You said that we're not out of compliance, and that made me feel like you were being a proponent of no action. And then you said we need to have action, and you're talking about being pushed into a corner. Are you saying that you want action?
No, absolutely no. And not at all. I think that we need to stand up for our rights and say we are in compliance with the compact. We've been in compliance forever on the compact. Kevin Ryan said that during our meetings. He said that to our roundtable as well. And now all of a sudden the press is telling us, well, and then so we have these other entities telling us that, well, Colorado needs to do something. Well, we've already using 3.5 out of our 7.5, so we're not using any of our water. So I'm just confused here. So, but anyhow, I was really concerned that I hope, and I sent an email to your fellow member on the committee, Andy Mueller, as well, that so we really need to consider no action right here. And I know the state is kind of interested in having some, you know, we need to do our part, but hey, we're not the problem here. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, you better watch out, because Becky will take you on tour with her with those talking points, Doug. She'll just be part of the road show. Because I think that's what, you know, she's been just doing such an awesome job with, and they'll fill you in later. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think the value in the task force is that we're continuing to talk and, you know, hear about the different things that people are doing in the municipal world and in agriculture, and what tools on the ground people are actually looking for that can help, you know, possibly with some demand reduction, whether or not that goes to a downstream reservoir, or it just, you know, continues to allow Colorado to get its, water house in order, which I have been a huge proponent of since being on the CWCB. Is we have this huge state. We use, water to continue to enjoy the lives that we've created here over generations, and for, newcomers and tourists, and for the benefit of other people that eat our ag products, etc. And, we got to keep talking about it. And if hopefully something good comes from the continued conversation of the task force, and I appreciate your comments. And if you're already on there, please feel free to make a public comment. We are going to try to give topics for public comment. So if people have specific ideas or, something they want to react to that is the topic du jour, that can kind of help us focus on the day too, so that there's an opportunity there as well. Thanks for that.
Okay, T. Wright?
Yes, Steve, thank you. And first of all, I want to second very strongly Doug's last comments. And in regards to Mike's comment, if it's appropriate, I would like to move that we submit our white paper, that we put it in Mike's hands to take down tomorrow, to do just that.
One second. Motion second. We have a motion in a second. Any to send the white paper down with Mike. Is there any discussion? Anybody on the Big River Committee?
I'd like to just amend it, just fire off an email instead of pack it with me.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is tough, Mike, but it wouldn't be that hard, I don't think, for me to be in Granby on the 28th, and that's not very far. So T. Wright, maybe a proposed friendly amendment would be to not try to do it tomorrow, but shoot for the 28th, and maybe Mike and I can vote.
That's fine. That's fine with me, Jeff.
Hey, this is Amy. Can I just offer a little bit of information really quick? I just want to let you all know that we were directed by our board to submit the full package of work that CWCB has done on demand management. And as part of that, we thought it was really important to provide all the input and information we got from the roundtables and from others. So I believe that your paper was included in that big package, but it was a 400-page package. So I think it's there, but feel free to submit it as its own standalone document as well. Just wanted to let you know.
And I would say highlight that it's been sent as part of that package, because what we tried to do, and speaking as the former director, not the current director of CWCB, was to say any program involves the work of all the people that have done the work on demand management. And so that did not just consist of the work that was done by CWCB. We were conveners in a lot of that. And what came out of some of that convening was the work from this Basin Roundtable. And so I do believe that was submitted, and but to highlight it, that it was already submitted, and then maybe reiterate whatever points you think. While I have just a couple seconds, I will say, yes, Doug, plan on clearing your calendar for the rest of the year, and probably into the spring. And I think you probably summarized my 45-minute presentation into that couple minutes. So there you go.
Well, thanks for the work you do, Jennifer, Sue. Yeah, so thanks for the work. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to get back on your motion and kind of clarify a little confusing thing that just happened. T. Wright said let's send it with Mike tomorrow. Mike said, how about you email it instead, so he doesn't have to pack it with him? And then there was an awkward twist of, well, let's wait till the 22nd. And I just want to clarify, I don't know, 28th, whatever the date was. I just want to clarify, probably the waiting isn't necessary. And what we really need to do is just friendly amend T. Wright's motion to email it by tomorrow rather than give a paper to Mike to pack down.
So we can email it.
Yeah,
And
right.
I think we ought to, if Jeff can be there on the 28th to discuss it
Sure,
in the public comment, I think that would add.
but it doesn't hurt to have it there early.
Perfect, no, both ways, and potentially they already have it, so why don't you browse that 400 pages tonight, Mike, and let us know.
I got a lot of reading to do, don't I?
Yeah, you do.
One of the 80s topics.
Okay, so we have, go ahead, Will.
So in deference to what Jackie was saying, are we kind of saying that Mike's gonna take it with, but he's just gonna underscore the fact that we submitted it and what it says rather than resubmitting it? That's,
That's what I think we're saying, Will,
Right.
for what Mike's gonna do tomorrow. And then Jeff will actually submit it and make public comment on it.
And I'm gonna try to go with Jeff.
Candidate Jeff.
Bill?
What I got out of all that was, we're gonna resubmit it as an independent document.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that I think it stands out of those other 400 pages.
Yes, yes, yep, absolutely.
And then we'll highlight those points in the public comment section in Granby, Bill. That's the idea.
Are you clear? on
So
the
I'm
motion?
with my friends, so you all decide what you want to do.
I'd say that again, T. Wright.
I'm with my friends, so I'll let my friends decide what they want to do.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion on the floor, and we think Katie's got the gist of it. We'll send it with Mike. We'll make sure it's in the package. He'll have it. And Jeff and Ken will go down to Granby and talk about the bullet points of it and submit it again. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed or don't understand the motion, please say nay. Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you, T. Wright.
Kate, is that easy?
Yep,
Or-
I got
okay.
it.
All right.
Okay, so Colorado River District update. Jane's not on, so are you feeling it?
Well, Zane was only Zane last time because he was doing a legislative update. So, today it's me.
Okay,
So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here.
Was Erin like gonna do her presentation, Mike?
You missed one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe see if she has anything else.
Aaron, sorry, Aaron, I skipped by you again.
Right. That's not a problem, Steve. And on a much lighter topic than the task force, I'll just fill you in on a couple things going on here in the Yampa and White basins. First of all, since our last meeting, we did have a call in the White River. Again, same calling location. That was the Taylor Draw power conduit. That call lasted all the way until, so it started on, the call started on July 31st and then went through September 7th. The call came off on September 7th, not because all of a sudden we had a bunch of water in the river, but rather because Taylor Draw went down for some maintenance. The power conduit needed some maintenance. So we do suspect the call will come right back on after they've completed that maintenance, but just to let everybody know that we did have that call come on. We expect to see it come on again. Other calls that we've had of recent since our last conversation, we did have a call on the Elk River. The Elk River is still on call. It's for the minimum in-stream flow water rate. Just so you're aware, the flows in the Elk River right now are around 50 CFS. The water rate's for 65 CFS. So obviously flows are below the calling water rate. And then also during between our last meeting and now, we've had releases start out of Elk Creek Reservoir as well as Stagecoach Reservoir. Those releases started on August 18th. and are continuing. Right now, the releases out of Stagecoach are around 20 CFS. If those flows were not in the river, we'd have about 50 CFS going through the city of Steamboat Springs, and the river is looking low and sad and would look worse without the water in there. And then coming out of Elkhead Creek Reservoir right now is a fair amount of water. There's 70 CFS coming out right now. And my screen just blinked, so I'm hoping you can all still hear me. But 70 CFS is coming out of Elkhead right now. It is going to be reduced to 50, not because, again, we have a bunch of flows in the river, but because the recovery program is trying to manage what water they do have in the river. So, and if that water was not in the river right now, that 70 CFS, we'd be seeing about 100 CFS of the Maybell gauge. So there's just some updates on what we're doing here with Division Water Resources as far as administration and calls.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Does anybody have any questions, Frank?
Just, Aaron, this is Frank. A quick question. Can you speak a little bit to the couple of remaining stipulations on your measurement rules, what the status of those are?
Yeah, we continue to work through those stipulations. Our big protesters probably we've entered into a lot of stipulations, but we have some bigger protesters, I'll call them bigger, in the sense that 20 Mile Coal, for example, we have 10, 12 separate protests that were filed by 20 Mile Coal Company. And then we have the same number, 10 or 12 protests that were filed by Silver Spur, which is a very large landowner in the North Platte River Basin. So when you take those two and combine them, they're close to half of our protests that we received. Of the other half, we're probably a half to 2/3 complete with those and have entered into stipulations. So that's where we are, and we just continue to work through them. Right now, I'm not seeing that any of them are going to go to trial. We have, I think, one set for trial, but we've stayed all deadlines because we do believe we're going to be able to resolve that matter. So yeah, we still have some work in front of us, but we're making a lot of progress.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Aaron? Anybody online? Okay, oh, hang on. T. Wright.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to lower my hand. That's.
Oh,
I'll take
okay.
it down.
Okay. All right, thank you, Aaron.
You bet.
All right, Rebecca, on to you now. Sorry.
No worries. All right, well, I think I've met a lot of you, but for those of you who have not, I haven't had the chance to meet. I'm Rebecca Breezemore. I've been on the roundtable just for a few times now, fairly new, only been with the River District 6 months. I'm a water resources engineer and project manager with the River District, and I'm the technical point person for the Yampa-White-Green Basin. So don't live up here, but spend quite a bit of time up here, luckily for me. So we're trying to get River District updates as a standing agenda item in Basin Roundtables to improve our communication with our constituents. So going to be brief updates, hopefully, but just want to be able to give you guys what's going on with the River District to keep you informed. So, in terms of a Big River, we didn't have a Big River committee meeting today, so there's really not a whole lot to update on this, and so just cancel that meeting. But just from a River District perspective of what's going on, we're waiting for that draft supplemental environmental impact statement. We're expecting it to come out any day now. And the River District will be commenting on it. I forget what the comment period is, but there will be a comment period, and we're happy to share our comments when we have those. So if you're interested in the River District's comments, we can provide that. Just as a reminder, for us to make sure that we're communicating well with you all, we are working on these issues all of the time. So please feel free to talk to me if you have questions. One thing that's really important for us is keeping up relationships, not just within our basins, but also on a broader context outside of the basin. And so one thing that we did earlier this summer, which we were pretty proud of, was we hosted the Central Arizona project to come and visit Colorado and visit Western Colorado and see what it's like here, and to really see firsthand, our limitations with hydrology and how our operations are vastly different from the lower basin. So they were here for about 3 days.
and toured around, the Colorado River and the Gunnison Basin, and had about 12 staff and board members present. Raquel Flinker from the River District put this on and did a great job. It was really just an incredible opportunity to meet with them and really form some strong relationships with them and help them understand what we're dealing with. So that was back in June, but wanted to make sure you guys knew that we did that because it was pretty awesome. And I got to see Morrow Point at the Mesa's filling, which doesn't happen often, and it had never happened that late in the year before. So they got really lucky with that. Next time we'll have to bring them up to the Yampa-White-Green. I don't want to go too much into the task force because Jackie gave way better information than I can since I'm not on it, but just as a reminder, the River District is on the task force. Andy Mueller is representing the River District. He gave a presentation at the last meeting, I believe it was, about the work that the River District has done in the impacts of demand management and stakeholder involvement with that. The River District has had about a decade of researching that and to look into impacts, et cetera. And so he was presenting these studies to the task force. His presentation is on the task force website if you're interested in learning more about some of these studies. And then also, our board at our last board meeting, 2 board meetings ago, gave us some principles for the task force. So they sent Andy with, here are principles that we stand by, and these are on our website if you're interested in reading over these. Yeah, so also happy to answer questions on that, but essentially what Andy is working towards with the task force. In terms of community funding partnership updates, we haven't had any recent updates in the Yampa-White-Green area, but you know, we're pretty proud. We're about to award our 100th grant, which is really exciting. I'm not sure if we're gonna have a party, but we should. Really exciting. And then recently this year, we've given money to Steamboat's Smart Irrigation Control System, and then also to the soil moisture work that's going on in the basin. We haven't had anything from the Yampa-White-Green in the past few months, so send grant application. Love to see it. And then another exciting thing going on is the Colorado River District. We have supported this Western or Growing Water Smart workshop, which is for local leaders to work on water conservation planning and to learn about different options. Usually it's like city officials that attend this, and there's another training that's happening in October in Grand Junction, and the city of Steamboat Springs is attending. So we're really excited for that. And there's a bunch of other Western Slope cities, but within the Yampa-White-Green Steamboat is going. So. And final plug, our water seminar, our annual water seminar is next week on Friday in Grand Junction. So if you haven't already RSVP'd, do come. We're really excited. We have some really great speakers. Senator Bennett is going to speak. So it's going to be great, and hope to see you there. And that's all I have. I'm a really fast talker. I apologize, but is there any questions? All right.
Have you taken any positions on, you know, we saw a significant uptick in assessed values, which is going to affect revenues for you have both your fund that is for grants as well as your board fund. What's the nature of your discussions?
Yeah, in terms of like Proposition HH.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be up to our board, I believe, in our next board meeting. Is that correct? In October. So we don't have we don't know yet, but it'll be up to our board. Yeah.
On the one slide, we had a list of, I don't know, objectives or recommendations or something.
Yeah.
That first one.
Yeah.
Colorado should not implement systematic water conservation. I guess my question about that is, especially on the Front Range, you hear a lot about water recycling and, you know, different municipalities that are doing stuff. I guess my question is, why is that a principle for the task force?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is in reference to, well, first it, we shouldn't incorporate system conservation until the lower basin has production. But this is referring specifically to like demand management and fallowing programs. So, we're still, advocating, of course, we should limit our water uses, et cetera. But in terms of paying farmers to fallow lands, we think that before we do that, we need the lower basin needs to come to the table.
So it's really referring to SCPP.
Yes, exactly. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I guess in reading that, it seemed kind of contradictory to a lot of
Yeah,
what we're talking about.
yeah, no, all for conservation.
Okay, anybody online have a question for Rebecca?
Steve, this T Wright, I assume from the voice that was Bill back that was asking that question. And I wanted Rebecca to put into context for him how far out of bounds the lower basin is in their usage.
I think Becky will handle that way better than I can.
I saw the draft. So the conversation then, but Becky's gonna cover that here in a little bit, right?
That'll be fine. You bet.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I guess what I was thinking is more than one of those interface theories.
So Bill, keep in mind, this was specifically for the task force who's considering making recommendations to the legislature for a state run program. It's not talking about trying to conserve water and taking bonds, see voter and door and something else. This is to do with the big picture and on that interstate. Yeah. Don't, why are we saving, the question is that, why are we saving money? They're saving water in Colorado when the lower basin will be.
No, I understand.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. All right, Jeff and Ken, Big River update.
So I think I'll just start with Big River. We didn't have a meeting this month, with a pretty light agenda, just a couple of things. The supplemental environmental impact statement, we are waiting with bated breath. As soon as that thing is released, we'll try to get it distributed and digested. We will probably convene a Big River committee meeting once we see that and have a little bit of time to get it under our belt. The work that we did at the last roundtable meeting and the lively discussion that we held about the letter of support for the White River PBO, we did get, and Steve submitted the letter, I think, just as we voted. We did get a reply from Julie Stolle. She is, if I understand it, she is David Graff's direct supervisor. It looks like fish recovery from the Fish and Wildlife Service has not moved forward either way with the PBO. The letter that Julie sent back, we distributed just to a few. It asked a lot of questions. And I think the Fish and Wildlife will consider the thing. I don't think anyone should feel like the work that we did in the letter of support was a waste. Clearly they read it and they understood our points in support of our colleagues from the White River. They just haven't moved forward yet. And when they do, I think, we did a solid for our friends. So those two things. Stand by for the supplemental environmental impact statement, and as soon as we get that thing, we'll go to work.
There possibly.
Well, okay. Yeah.
Is there a possibility to get a copy of the letter that was submitted?
Oh, you bet, Chris. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, let's just do it that way. I'll get it to Katie and
Should be on the website, isn't it, Doctor?
Which the letter we sent out of the letter we received.
So we didn't receive a letter back, Chris, so I received, so we sent the letter. And I received an email back from Julie Stoller, because I sent the letter. So it's not, so it's just an.
Okay, is that what you'd like to see though, Chris? You'd like to see her reply?
It would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Easily beneficial.
I'll have to
We'll
get
get it out. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Colin has a hand raised.
Oh, Alden, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And sorry I can't be there tonight. But I've been visiting with David Graff as well. And I'm definitely going to say I don't feel like this conversation is over with the White River Management Plan nor the PBO. As I've been understanding more, the White River Management Plan has not even been fully adopted right now. It's still considered in draft mode and subject to change. And I was under the impression that the committees within the recovery program had fully adopted them, because I know the White River Planning Team had approved that and said, yes, this needs to move forward. The David Graff and the recovery program, the program director's office is still working on getting a final determination as Mike as stated about the whether to do a PBO or not, but that discussion is not done. And I know there's others still working on the sidelines, still trying to figure out why this is kind of stalled out after 10 plus years of work. And what's the premise of not really following through with this? So I've been told to kind of be patient. There's some other things, and as many know, I'm not a very patient individual, especially when we're talking about the Colorado pike minnow and getting endangered species protections. But yet I'm told after 10 years, I got to wait a few more months. So they have indicated that in November, they would like to be put on the agenda for the Basin Roundtable. And that was as of yesterday. So I do have them on a sticky note that they will be visiting with you in November, as they've also indicated they will be making visitations with other groups throughout the White River Basin that have expressed considerable interest to move this program forward. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Alden. All right, so let's move on to IBCT update. Jeff and Ken. Do you have anything?
One of the things that we wanted to talk about, if we hadn't already, was to talk about the C9 Summit. You've heard all about that. Expecting everybody to be there.
When is that?
November 14th. It's a Tuesday. And there'll be more details to follow, an agenda. I just want to make sure you get it penciled into your calendars so that you can make sure to attend if your schedule allows. And I think once you see the agenda, you'll say, I would like to be there for that. If this is successful, it could turn into an annual event. And it's certainly that opportunity to really, and this now I'm kind of bleeding over into the IBCC portion of the presentation, that this is one of the goals would be to improve the communication and the interactions between the Water Conservation Board, the IBCC, and the roundtables. And hopefully putting us all in the same room will stimulate that conversation. And there's several outcomes that we've been discussing that could come from the C9 that would give us direction as a roundtable on projects that we need to be working on as sort of our homework assignments. So it's not just a series of very interesting presentations. There's actually engagement with roundtables individually. So that's all I had.
I think that's it. Questions at all?
No questions in the room. Anybody online have a question? Alden, your hand's still up, but I assume it didn't go down. Okay. So moving on to Peppo, Patrick and Ken.
Well, today's meeting, the lion's share of today's meeting was working on the very specific script that we want to present to the videographers that are going to produce a roundtable, a 3-minute video of, who are we? So when you go to our roundtable website, although Patrick's done an excellent job with a lot of really relevant information, easy to access. This video would be a great summary of why the video, or why we exist, what we're doing, who's on this, how it works throughout the state. And trying to put that all into 3 minutes is what we spent a lot of time on today, trying to boil it down and make it as, if you don't give really clear direction to the people doing the video, you better not have high expectations, because they can't read our mind. We have to actually help them. So that was the main thing we talked about. We also want to do a little more interaction with the roundtable as a whole. For next year's special events, we still have a handful of special events that we can use our canopies for. We'll have a lot more materials next year. But we're going to try to be a little more proactive and get a complete calendar of all the events in Rio Blanco, Moffett, and Broward County, and ask you, we'll have a sign-up sheets at our meetings for you to say, we'll probably just pass them around over here, and you can say, yeah, I would like to be at that event, and I'll cover the round table, or I'll cover your canopy, and talk to folks about the round table. All part of that. The fact that we have been around for a better part of 20 years, and there's still an awful lot of people don't even know we exist. We know we do important work. We need to be more proactive. It's one of the few things mentioned in the 1177 Act that is about the importance of public education. And fortunately, we have the work that's being done by Yampa-White-Green. They're so proactive, and literally talking with thousands of students each year throughout Northwest Colorado. But we're not done. That's not enough. We have more work that we can do. That's what I have. Patrick, what did I forget? That's not it. Thank you very much. We're still looking for another member or two.
Questions for Ken in the room? Online? Okay. Patrick, do you have my presentation up for grants? Go ahead, next slide, Patrick. So, at the last meeting, I showed you some Yampa-White-Green 2023 grant cycle results. There's been a minor change to that. I'll show you when we get to it. Preliminary grant funding for the 2024 grant cycle. I'll just briefly go through that and what our plan is. Tabling of the Coal Creek Mesa Measuring Device Grant until November 2023 at the earliest. And then I've got a couple of things that I'm hoping that we have some time at our October grant meeting to talk about and bring to the roundtable for approval at our November meeting. So go ahead, Patrick. So the only thing that changed is for the September 2023 CWCB meeting. I originally had $46,650 was the statewide match, and it's $43,194, which is a difference of about $3,300. Because that's a multi-roundtable, and with multiple state asks from each of the roundtables, they divided the dollars up a little differently than what I thought they would. So I had a question for Jeff Rodriguez. He was able to chase that down for me. So those would be the finals if those grants get adopted or accepted next week. Then we would be over $1 million, about $1,028,000 of projects that were funded in 2023, and almost $1,120,000 of statewide funds that were put into projects in the Yampa-White-Green. So go ahead, Patrick. I was hoping we would hear something more from Jeff today on the 300,000. So we have a balance of $173,588 today in our Basin account. We're assured that we'll get $300,000 of funding in October. And that'll put our account balance at about 473. There are several basins that aren't gonna get their full 300 allotment to get them to the 750,000 max. So there's probably gonna be a little bit more than the 300,000 that might be coming our way, but they won't really know until next week, and we probably won't hear until early October, is what Jeff's saying, so. So anyway, I just wanted to cover that real quick. Go ahead, Patrick. At the May and July 2023 Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable meetings, Coal Creek Mason measuring device was tabled, pending getting a letter from the proponent, that all the partners on the ditch were participating. I'm again requesting this grant be tabled until at least the November 2023 meeting. Chris, is there any way you can reach out to them and just ask them what's going on? They won't answer they won't answer any of my emails to see what's going on. So
See how serious they are.
okay.
Why they're tabling it.
Okay, well, I'm tabling it because I'm not here.
Okay,
So,
all right. I didn't know they're calling it table, but yeah, I'll call that.
okay, thank you. Go ahead, Patrick. And then, coming to the November meeting, we'll discuss the CWCB BRT funding for 2024 and modify our grant funding for fiscal year 2024. I plan on doing that at our October grants meeting. So we'll have the discussion of, do we want to put in more than the 400,000 or not? So there was a lot of talk about how much extras are going to be. So by the time we get to our October meeting for grants, we ought to know, and we can decide as a grant committee and then bring it to the Basin Roundtable in November. I would like to talk about at our grants meeting, talk about the update of the BRT grant scoring matrix. So we score our matrix on our 8 goals and objectives from the BIP. And there's a PEPO and a multi-benefit piece. And in going through the adopted 2021 BIP update, there are a lot more there's a lot more categories under each of those main 8 bullets. So I think what we need to do is to update our scoring matrix, and not how the scoring matrix works, but when you read the descriptions, what are the things that we're looking for grants, and that's changed a little bit. So I plan on updating that and talking about that at our grants meeting. And I'm hoping that we'll come with a new table for adoption. And then update the grant guidelines with more explanation on what the process is once a grant is received, until it's heard at the grant subcommittee meeting, and then at the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable meeting. When we first started the grant subcommittee, Patrick and CAA took over kind of answering questions and trying to follow up on grants and making sure that they met all our rules. It's been a while now, 4 or 5 years since they were doing that. So a lot of that's been taken on by me to try to do that. So I just want to discuss all that with the grant committee to say, hey, here's what we're doing and here's why, and try to bring some adopted some grant guidelines for adoption at the November meeting as well. So next slide, Patrick. So that's the end of that update. Do anybody have any questions on the grants committee or any other questions?
I was just curious, how many grant applications have you received for the October meeting?
right now I've received none. I've been talking with, where'd Jonathan go? Oh, there you go. I've been talking with Jonathan about a potential one. I've been talking with Andy Schaffner about, Stillwater Reservoirs. I don't believe she's gonna be ready in September or because our deadline's like September 20th. I don't believe she's gonna have anything in, so right now, there's only one person one proponent that's talked to me. But normally, as we get closer to the 20th, all of a sudden, I'll start getting emails from folks that have done grants before and don't need to call me and ask questions or whatever. They kind of understand what they're doing. So I'm not sure, Bill. It may only be one, and it may be multiples. I don't. That's just quick. Go ahead, Frank.
And Steve, I think I understood this correctly. We'll know, or will we know before the October 11th grants meeting if we get that 300,000? Is that pretty well staffed?
Yeah. So Jeff, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Did you hear the question?
I did not.
Oh.
Well, I heard it, but I didn't catch all of it.
So the question was, our grants meeting, I believe, is October 10th. Will we know by then what the CWCB amount that they're adding to the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable account be before the 10th
of October?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can count on that 300,000 for sure, like you mentioned, Steve. And then I'm just trying to figure out what the breakdown is going to be of the leftover WSRF funds for the basins that within that $300,000 annual allocation will be at or above the $750,000 cap. I suspect it'll be somewhere around the $50,000 mark for all the basins that are still below the cap. So you could probably pencil that in, Steve, but we need to make sure next week at the board meeting and finance committee. So I'll let you know as soon as I have a hard number, but that's kind of what it's shaking out to be.
Okay, so the real question was, would we know by the October 10th meeting?
Oh yeah, you'll know for sure. And if you don't know, I did something wrong and I'll know. And that will be a good reminder for me to update it. But I'm hoping to update the balance sheet, that first week of October.
Okay.
At the latest.
Question for Jeff.
Jeff, one additional question. We know that the severance tax revenues have been substantially higher than their historic average. Are we expecting to see any additional funds maybe appropriated for that as well?
It's a good question, Ken. I don't see any additional funds coming to WSRF as of right now that we're projecting. But that can always change with a special infusion like we saw last year. But as far as I know, this year severance tax is kind of pretty stable, so don't foresee a special infusion to WSRF this year.
Thank you.
Maybe next year.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other questions?
Steve, you were essentially saying that you're gonna kind of codify the follow-up process for the grant.
Yes.
That you do. And I just want to support that idea because since I've been on the roundtable, you guys have come so far in your process, in your approval, the scoring matrix.
Thanks to Steve.
Yeah, and in the software business, we used to have this thing we called the bus test. And what that meant was if the person responsible for that code got run over by a bus, could be still supported. I'm not sure the grants program passes the bus test today if Steve gets run over by a bus.
There he is. I'm trying to do everything Patrick was doing.
So I think the idea of documenting that is a dang good one.
Yeah.
Stay off the highway, Steve.
I worry about the beer truck in the parking lot. I don't know about a bus. Okay, so anyway, that's all I have for a grants update. So Upper Yampa Water Conservation Conservancy District activities, Andy.
I know it's a mouthful, huh?
It is a mouthful at this late hour.
So I think with Patrick's help, I'm gonna talk from up here. Get through it here, and I know you guys have some important stuff to hear from Becky Mitchell about, but I'll tell you just a few things and try not to trip over everything and unplug the whole works. All right. I'm Andy Rossi. I'm the general manager of the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. I've worked with many of you, a few of you, it's the first time meeting. Hi, nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. I know it's a busy time of year. We've had a pretty good water year, not consistent, but pretty good. And so what allowed me as the general manager of the Upper Yampa District to do is to pursue some projects of a technical nature that have sort of been incubating for a few years. And so I just wanted to give you, really honestly, is about an update on 50% of all that effort. There's a lot of other things that are going on that we're not going to cover tonight that I could come back and give you another presentation on. So here it is. Here's our update on technical projects from the Upper Yampa District, or as I kind of thought about it, is what happens when you lock Andy in his office for about 3 months. This is what happens. So next slide, please. I want to talk to you tonight about 4 projects we have going, and 2 of them I'm just going to touch on really quickly because one we just sort of helped out with, which is the first one there, the soil moisture and MET sensor network station, and I'll get into it in just a little bit, but I'm going to defer right now. If you have real specific questions about this, please, I'm going to direct you to your colleague on the roundtable, Madison Muxworthy, because she's the project manager locally here. And she knows more about this and more current information than I do. So I just want to preface that. And then the last one here, this Wildfire Ready Watersheds program is brand new. We just got funding approval a week ago, and it's a little bit separate category than these first 3 right here. So go ahead, Patrick. So when we think about technical projects of, say a scientific or analytical nature at the Upper Yampa, I always try to think about like, where are we starting from? What's driving these efforts? And I think it's good to say, even if we all know it or think it or have experienced, but climate and drought alter our stream flow behavior. You've all seen it recently. It's something that we've been living. This graph on the left here with all the wavy lines, that's the Basin Forecast Center's prediction for the Yampa Steamboat Springs from 2021. The ultimate, thank you very much. It's right on the top of this. Oh. That red button. Okay, great. This guy right here, you can see great forecasting product usually, but came out super low. Something's up there. And you go to this year, we started off the year with Dry Creek just up the road here flooding significantly in 2023. And then you just heard from Aaron Light, we're having to sustain and prop up our flows with reservoir releases right now. So a very inconsistent year. So there's something going on. And I think it's important for us as water managers to figure out what's going on to the best of our abilities. So a few of those things I want to, before I get into the details of the actual projects, just want to give you sort of a window on how I think about how they all fit together. Next slide. So we say, overall climate and drought, that's altering our stream flow. That's what I'm starting to look at right now. And, when I was the engineer at the Upper Yampa District, we started to see these patterns back in 2009, 2010. Something was not quite jiving with our statistical models, and we were a little too busy to be able to figure it out on our own. So I go out and I do a lot of research, and I was trying to figure out how I could sort of articulate to this. And luckily, these 2 folks, Mr. Modi and Ms. Panat, just gave some very good presentations at the Western Water Assessment. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that research group out of Ceres, the University of Colorado, those folks. And what they talked about was really the same thing I'm trying to grapple with, was we have all this existing data. We've been using existing data for years and years to kind of come up with forecasting and diagnostic tools. But what is it that we're doing wrong now? Well, one of them is that this sort of right now we're doing a non-adaptive sampling approach, and I'd like to move towards an adaptive sampling approach. So what that means is looking at your existing data, but maybe moving away from your standard metrics like April 1 snow water equivalency. Maybe there's something we could do better, or just looking at our population of only drought years in our data analysis instead of all of them. So we don't want to get rid of all the existing data products, but we might want to look at them in a slightly different way. And then the other part that came up in their presentation is this concept of the need to identify specific predictors that maximize model performance. So we could stand up a model that's going to give us some sort of diagnostic tool to look at any part of the hydrologic cycle, but we might be basing it on the wrong driver. And this is a really fascinating study, which isn't out yet, it's in review, but should be published soon. And they looked at, I think, 4 river basins across the American West: Crystal River, Animas River, Logan River, and the Jemez River. I think that's the 4 there. And they started with a basic forecasting model that was based on April 1 sweep. And then they threw in there a comparison of all kinds of meteorological and climate predictors that could possibly have an effect on the outcomes there. And they kind of did a judgment of how the models performed. And of those 4 rivers, it went the whole range. And one of them in the Animas, April 1 sweep, did a terrible job of predicting flows. On some of them, April 1 sweep did a pretty good job, and everything in between. So really, before we jump into models, we need to do, again, sort of this deep dive in existing data. So that's one concept I'm playing around with. So how are we going to do that? Next slide, please. One of them is this right here, is we need to start thinking about non-snow predictors, because they really do increase our forecasting ability. And that, as we've talked about, is our soil moisture and meteorological network that we're standing up in the Yampa Basin. Next one, please. The other thing is sort of this existing data and having to slice it up on different levels and by different sort of compartmentalized analytical looks is our snowpack. The snowpack is always going to be important here. We're never going to get rid of that importance. So what I've done is I've contracted with the USGS in their hydrologic modeling department, and they are going to expand what's known as the snow model analytical tool that they have to the Yampa Basin from Fortification Creek up. And then next slide, please. Once you get these new data tools, you got to have some place for them to land. And what I have looked around at is there's a forecasting tool out there that many of you may have heard the name of. It's called Wharf Hydro. And hopefully all of these sort of processes can lead to an updated set of management tools. So that's the overall vision of what I'm trying to accomplish when I stand up some of these analytical efforts. I'm not just up there thinking about, oh, this would be interesting, that'd be interesting. There's really a bit of a method to that. Patrick, next one, please. So let's just quick talk about soil moisture. As I said, please talk to Madison Muxworthy here, but this is a picture of the first one that Madison herself helped install. We had a ton of help on this, not only from on the ground personnel, but funding, all the funding partners right here, CWCB, Colorado River District, CMC, CW3E, which is the Scripps Institute, Sustainability Council, and us at the Upper Yampa Conserving District all gave money to this, and we're pretty excited. Go ahead, Patrick, next one. And the first station is up and running. You might not be able to see here, but it's just due south of Stagecoach and due east of Pittsburgh, up on the flanks of the maybe to be one day developed ski area. It's kind of in that neighborhood. And please, this website is right here. If you want to see the data in real time, go check it out. It's super interesting. It really is quite fascinating to watch it. And then there's a good article out there on Colorado Sun from 2022 that kind of talks more generally about the effects of soil moisture on our water processes. So I would encourage you all to check that out. Next slide, please. Okay, A newer project here, which is this snow modeling and remote sensing project we have with the USGS. That's going to start federal fiscal year 2024. So that's October 1st of this year. They'll move into that. And what the snow model is, it's part of anyone who's may have heard this term around NGWAS, which is a new generation looking at all the departments and parts of the hydrologic cycle by the USGS to modernize some of the things I've been talking about. And so basically what it'll do is there's two parts. They're going to do a retrospective past 30 years of all the snow data in we'll call it the Upper Yampa Basin from Fortification Creek confluence up. They're going to use SNOTEL data. They're going to use satellite data, and I think one other data source. And they're going to do a 30-year retrospective, and they're going to be able to slice it up by elevation, by ground cover type, temporally, to get another sort of statistical deep dive in how our snowpack has been changing over the last 30 years. Which will give us, better information about different areas of our basin that may be changing quicker than other areas. The other part of this is that from 2024 through 2026, this snow model product produces what's called a surface water input, so the SWI, and what it will do is during runoff season, it will output in millimeters per day how much of the snowpack is contributing to our current surface water flows that we see. So this will very much be a pilot project, and it's going to take us that long to see how it does. But this could be a very promising and pretty substantial leap forward for us for snow to flow type processes understanding. This model was deployed in the Upper Rio Grande and also in the Rocky Mountain National Park area as well before. And I have a copy of the paper from the Rio Grande with me if anybody wants to look at that. It's got some really interesting parts to it. It's got a bit of the slicing in there, and also it has a comparison to airborne snow observatory data, how close they got. It's within centimeters, which is pretty great. Next slide, please, Patrick. This is just a map of the domain, so all the way up there, and this is some of the data products, some of the slicing we get from the USGS. They slice up, snowpack and SWE by elevation. They look at all kinds of different timing parts of the snowpack as it progresses through the season by aspect, by elevation, by ground cover. So we're going to get, a peer-reviewed journal article in 2026 out of this at all. That's going to be specifically looking at the snowpack in the Yampa Basin. So that's the USGS model that's getting ready to get going. Next slide, please. Okay, the next one here, and now I'm starting to take all these things and put them together. I figured out a while ago that, if you try to use a little bit of all the different forecasting products that are out there, you're really going to end up just kind of pulling your hair out, trying to get all the different data streams to come together in one sort of cohesive message for water resources management. And there is a newer model, and I say newer, it's probably a decade old at least now, and it's a public domain model that came out of research. It's called WRF Hydro. And WRF just stands for Weather Research and Forecasting. And this is the hydrologic extension part of that model. And what it is a gridded model where there's an input of lots and lots of existing data streams, meteorological data, climate data, all kinds of stuff. It goes in and it can output things like surface water flow predictions on a gridded scale. So what I started thinking about was, that's great. That's a new way of getting our forecasting data out. We can deploy that wherever we want. It just doesn't have to be at stream gauges, although it's helpful to be at stream gauges. We could say, top Elkhead Creek or wherever, we can customize that to where we want the output to be, delivered for us. And so I thought about, well, what would be the best way to sort of organize where we'd have those deliveries? And so I started thinking about the state mod model. that we have. And for those of you who know, state mod kind of gets rolled out and kind of displayed every time we update the state water plan, right? Not very often, but it's sitting there. It's a great model. It's useful. It has a ton of information in it. And this basin is really good at updating their state model. It's probably one of the most current out of all of them on the west slope. I believe the River District just did, I think, their latest risk study. I think they found that the common denominator era for all state models on the west slope is 2013. 10 years old. It's a little troubling, right? So ours is probably more like 2020, 2022, depending on which part you look at, which is great. So the part in state mod that I really was interested in, if you remember, state mod has all these nodes in there where it represents water uses and diversions, and you have to put flows into it. And one of those sets of nodes are natural flow nodes. And that is exactly what Wharf Hydro will output for you. You could pick a spot on the map and ask it for a prediction of natural flow. That means it's going to give you what Mother Nature and runoff or rain or anything else is going to produce, absent of diversions. Well, how do we get diversions in there? Well, then we plug it into state mod and find out some sort of water supply predictive or outlook. State mod is used on sort of a 50-year, 10-year, 5-year time scale. I'm thinking we might be able to use it on a seasonal time scale, which is a little bit different. We're probably going to be pushing up against the limits of what it's useful for, but I think it's valuable and I think it could yield some results for us here. So one thing I want to say for sure is as we go through this, I'm working with partners. I'll probably end up working with some of the same scientists at the Scripps Institute. I've been working with Paige Wheel at Leonard Rice to kind of develop this. And we went through a pilot process this past runoff in 2023 to see if this would kind of work. And we were pretty excited about the results we got. The other thing is we're going to need money to do it. It's going to be pretty expensive. So we are going to apply for a Water Smart Applied Science grant here in October to try to get it funded. And then very important here is whatever we end up with, if we're successful, this is not going to be a replacement or a predictor for water rights administration. We are not going to be able to tell you what day the river is going to go on call. That's not an outcome here. So before we get too excited, next slide, please.
You might get beat up if you get that information out.
Yeah, or make a lot of money, right? So what we're going to do for the Wharf Hydro extension, now that we've already looked into it, this gets pretty technical. I'm not going to go through all of it. But the other part that state mod is kind of rests on is the CDSS system, the decision support system in Colorado. Has tons of data in it, especially from stream gauges. You can use that data to calibrate the output of Wharf Hydro to a specific gauge and improve the model performance. Wharf Hydro already has a domain that's spread across Colorado, but it's only been developed in Colorado for a few very specific places. It hasn't been developed all over. So when we're done with this, we'll have it for the Yampa Basin, and we'll have a blueprint for how to extend Wharf Hydro across all of Colorado, really, if you want. Next slide, please. The other thing we need to get in here is Wharf Hydro right now does not have a very good gridded sort of representation of our snowpack. And that's again where this USGS model comes in. We'll be able to take the output from that and hopefully funnel it into Wharf Hydro to again improve the model performance. It can do pretty well, but this is really going to kind of push it to its next level. So I'm pretty happy with that. And even if we don't end up using, you know, the Wharf Hydro to state mod extension, this connection I think is going to prove to be really valuable in the future. Next slide, please. And so here is the next thing, the state mod sort of connection. So what we did when I say we had a pilot program, we worked with a gentleman named Ming Pan out of the Scripps Institute. And I asked him, hey, how quickly can you get Wharf Hydro spun up to give me some results? And he said, well, I can do it pretty quickly. It just depends how many nodes you want or locations. So I gave him every natural flow node at a state mod in the Yampa. And 10 days later, he had forecasts for me for all of them. Just like that, which was fantastic. So then I said, okay, this is great. It's too much data for me to crunch through. So then I reached out to Paige Wheel at LRE and hired him to do the data crunching. And what he was able to do was look at that historical hydrology that state mod can be run with and wharf hydro. And we did a bit of a retrospective to see how close it got, and it's pretty good, but there's some specific parts of the wharf hydro model that doesn't do very well in Colorado. And one of them has to be at the tail end of the hydrograph out here in the fall. So we'll have to do some work on that to make it much better here. But what could we use it for? We're not going to use it to tell you when the river's going to go on call. You know, what else could we use it for? Well, one, I'm interested in the probability of reservoir fills and spills. You know, Yampa did not fill this year, and probably won't fill next year. It takes a while for our reservoirs at the upper end of the basin to recover, so that would be good for us to know. Free river season. What sort of, you know, timing on the river could we expect to have free river? Maybe important for the elk and the Yampa above Steamboat, more importantly than down here, but still important. Augmentation plans and contracted supplies. Our friends at the Water Trust and at the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they do a ton of work to try to predict how and when to deploy their storage resources to help us out on the Yampa River. If we can help them, give them an outlook into the season as early as possible, that would be great. The other thing is here is we might be able to get some risk for the potential of river calls. So what do I mean there? We could probably look at a part of the season based on a given hydrology from Wharf Hydro that says, hey, look, this part of the Yampa system might see some scarcity, say in the last 2 weeks of June. Hey, water commissioners, how about if you try to get out on the ground and talk to those folks and those diverters, see what they might be able to do, how worried are they, could they talk to each other and do some coordination amongst themselves to keep a call off, or for everybody to do better. Those are the kinds of things we hope it's used for, not for river administration, but just to kind of give folks a heads up of what's coming. Next slide. So that's all the very like hydrologically sort of specific technical stuff we're doing. The last one I talk about is this wildfire ready watersheds program. Wildfire is a big subject for all of us, and what I think the CWCB did really well, and also some folks here in the Yampa who've done pretty well. The city of Steamboat Springs and Mount Werner Water did a similar analysis for the Fish Creek drainage right now, which was an excellent product. And one of the blueprints for this program is to start thinking about wildfire risk, not for loss of life and property, but its effects on water resources, infrastructure. It could be irrigation, it could be reservoirs, it could be treatment plants, and also the effects on our streams, sedimentation, after fire, loss of hydrologic production in our natural areas. So these are the types of analyses that the CWC program has enabled us to be able to do. And I'm just going to say it's an excellent program. Chris Stern at CWCB and his team have done a ton of work to make it as easy as possible. The scope of work that I submitted for this program right here was about 21 pages long. I'd say maybe 5 to 10% of that was original content. I just went to their website, they had the blueprint, it's all there. You modify it for your needs and turn it around back to them. It's excellent. And I have some copies of that, and I'm happy to share our scope of work with anybody. But there's two parts of this whole program. There was a statewide susceptibility analysis. Could we have the next slide, please, Patrick? That's what it looks like here. It's really hard to see on this screen, but on your screens. What this is a statewide susceptibility analysis to post-wildfire impacts for all the watersheds. This is, I think, on a HUC 12 basis. And if you can see in our neck of the woods right in here, this is the Bear River and the Trout Creek and sort of reservoir area right in there. And then up by Steamboat Lake, and then this part of the Zirkles showed up as our hot spots here for highly susceptible to post wildfire risk. So next slide, please. What we're gonna do is we've got funding now, and what we're gonna develop is what's called the Bear River Wildfire Action Plan. I'm not gonna read these things because you guys can't see them right now, but there's certain tenants in there that have to be part of your plan, from stakeholder engagement to technical analysis to actually detailed prescribed mitigation efforts, projects at the back end that you say you're gonna do and go seek funding for to be able to do on the ground work to mitigate wildfire risk. This is a map of where we're gonna do it. It's basically from the town of Yampa all the way up to the headwaters. And I wanna say again, this program and the scope of work that I developed can be deployed anywhere in the Yampa-White-Green Basin, anywhere. I'm happy to share all that with all of you and help you get it stood up. So with that, I think that's as quick as I could have done, but I could take a few questions. Yeah.
So on your welfare ready watersheds, I mean, it's something that we're looking at something similar down in the White River.
Yeah.
Forest health and stuff like that. So how long did it take you to get this plan?
I started looking at, I knew about it when Chris Sturm sort of broadcast that the project was ready. So maybe that was January, February. You know, he kind of did a little bit of a roadshow telling everybody what was going on. I submitted, it took me, because I have other things to do, it probably took me 2 or 3 weeks to really get my scope of work all together as I was doing everything else and juggling things. And the turnaround, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before I got my approval from the CWCB for the funding. So it's actually federal money. So the CWCB is the gatekeeper and the curator of that. So I'll actually end up with a federal contract, and that's where I am now. I'm waiting for that federal contracting program to happen. And Jeff just popped up. He may know a little bit more about it, but the turnaround is quick, and Chris Sturm's team is really helpful.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and add just one quick thing here. The CWCB aspect of this program can be pretty quick, as you mentioned. The federal contracting is taking a while. So if you're planning on this project, I just want to be upfront about that. It is taking 6 to 8 months or so to get those federal contracts in place before you could actually see any reimbursement money. I do know we are working really hard to kind of cut that time down. Originally they told us it would take it could take up to a year, but so most of these have taken right around like the 6 months or so length of time. So just wanted to give you that information for your planning purposes, but the CWCB aspect of it does happen pretty quick, and we are working to try to cut that down a little bit more.
Yeah, some of the folks at Denver Water, I think they related to me like 4 to 5 months was there, sort of like once it's approved to where you really got the money in the bank account and ready to go. And it's okay, it gives you time to hire contractors, assemble stakeholder groups, things like that, and then the whole scope of work, I think it's take me a year to get it all done, from start to where we have a whole list of prescribed actions that we will then want to go out and conduct. Yeah. Yeah.
I might have a misunderstanding, but it seems like we had a program that was like the Yampa River Water Resource Toolbox. They had like kind of clearing out some data for water resources. Is that right?
Yeah, we do. We have a dashboard. So yes, that's right. And it's under development. So Upper Yampa ourselves, we have an internal dashboard, and that's kind of the foundation of the public facing one. So ours has a whole bunch of operations data from our dams that we can't share publicly. But the other one, Emily Lowell, and I can't remember who's the partner on the roundtable. You're involved, Julie, and
The Water Trust.
the Water Trust,
And Friends of the Yampa.
Friends of the Yampa.
And we're in the process of holding stakeholder meetings to put together, the public facing aspect
Yeah, and so if
So
you
this-
want invited that you can join and say, hey, I'd like to see this on the data dashboard, and it would be useful to me as a community member, and we'll try to get that data uploaded to it and show you how to use it.
So yeah, that was gonna be the point of my question is like this 450, would that data be able to interface with this dashboard, or is that still proprietary with?
No, it definitely, anything we do has to be publicly available. We're a publicly funded agency. So if we do a project, there isn't a security reason, like at our dams. We're gonna share it with everybody, absolutely.
Thanks, that answered it.
Yeah, you bet.
Any other questions for Andy? All right, thanks.
Thanks for your time. If you want any of that program or study documentation, just hit me up. Thanks.
All right, so Colorado DNR interstate and federal section updates.
I'm gonna take a cue from Andy and get up here and like.
There you
work the
go.
room. First of all, I probably wanna turn it over to online, if Lauren Risk is on, Jackie Brown, Director Brown mentioned that CWCB has a new director, and I want to make sure you all know that your emails, especially the negative ones, should go to Lauren Risk now. Anything positive that comes to me, I'm done with that. So if Lauren's here, I'd love for her to wave. If not, it might be a
Can you
little
guys
late.
see me? I'm here. I don't know if you can see me. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think you have that reverse though, Becky. The good ones come to me still.
Yeah.
You don't get out of that. No, thank you. I just wanted to pop in and say hi really quick. I appreciate that Jackie gave you guys the heads up that I am the new director of CWCB, and I'm really thrilled and honored to have that that position and following in the great footsteps of Becky here. And she and I are going to continue to work closely together and be aligned on all things Colorado River. And I am going to try and make my way around to all the roundtables in person, so we can have some face-to-face time. But in the meantime, I really just wanted to provide an opportunity to put a face to a name and thank you all for all of your good work. The roundtables are so important to how we do water in the state of Colorado, and I really appreciate it. I was the deputy of CWCB under Becky for about 6 years and was maybe more internal facing, and now I'm really going to just try and get out and about and meet all of you in person. So I hope to see you soon in the next few months. And in the meantime, if you do have any questions or concerns or thoughts that you want to share, positive or negative, please feel free to reach out to me. All my info is on the CWCB website, and I'll do my best to respond as quickly as I can. But really just wanted to say hi and thank you. So thanks for the quick minute, Becky.
Oh, no problem. Another plug I wanted to give on behalf of Lauren is the C9 Summit that was mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. Just so you know, there might be a little competition of who can have the most roundtable members there. And I saw a heavy push coming from the Rio Grande today. And so just so you know, I think there's a competition. You may want to try to win that. So it is a good opportunity to get everyone together, remembering that really the goal across the state is that interbasin kind of connections, and that's where we're going to have the best solutions is if we can work together and talk. Let's go ahead and put up the presentation, because poor Lauren, you're taking up the whole screen here.
That's awkward. You don't want to look at me.
No, we're good. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Becky Mitchell, your Colorado River Commissioner. And just so if you're not aware, there's been a little bit of a change within the state as of July 1st. There is a full-time position dedicated to the Colorado River Commission. And that's what freed up this role at the CWCB. And I think it's important to recognize why that came about. We all know that the Colorado River touches every corner of the state, whether they believe it or not. It has impact across the state. It's incredibly important. And especially right now with what's going on and the upcoming negotiations, it was important that someone can put 100% of their time dedicated to that. But as part of that, I wanted to make sure you all are aware that with that change, a big importance for me was that I get out to the roundtables, get out to wherever, not just the roundtables. I've been meeting with boards and commissions and utilities, and I was in Durango on Monday and Tuesday, up in the South Platte yesterday. I'm pretty sure, yeah, that was still Tuesday. I went from Durango to the South Platte. Today's Wednesday, right? So I'm here and then back to the metro tomorrow, and then some other interstate meetings that are happening on Friday. But I want to make sure to hear from all the voices across the state, and that's been a heavy initiative of mine. So today we want to update you a bit on what's happening on the Colorado River. This is a ever quickly moving conversation. Oh, do I need to do that? Oh, go to the next one. And so there's a lot going on. And before we get into the substantive issues, which we will, and I want to make sure that you hear, I want to talk about SCPP. I want to kind of go into some of the comments that T. Wright brought up in terms of numbers and what's happening. So we'll get into that a little bit. You've heard me say how critically important the Colorado River is. It provides for the agricultural sector, municipal, industry, and two tribes. So we need to make sure that we continue to have this river unite us, and make sure that the decisions that we make help us thrive. I heard a little bit of talk about why are we doing this or why are we doing that. I think it's important that you hear me say that my goal and initiatives as it relates to things that are happening on the ground within Colorado are for Colorado's protection. My intention with anything that's conservation related, any changes with anything, it is about protecting Colorado. The intention is not for to conserve water up here so it can continue lower basin overuse. And we can get into a little bit of the details on some of my guiding principles. I call them irrefutable truths. And really one of the key ones that I think is most important that should be guiding us is the equity between the upper basin and lower basin. The lower basin uses, while in some areas they may make more money than in areas of the upper basin, that does not mean that we are not equal to, our uses are not equal to, our environment is not equal to. And that is one of my guiding principles, but I didn't make those up. Those came from what I heard on the ground. And what I'm going to continue to hear, I hope. So, and you all know this, and it is a little difficult for the lower basin to get. I often have heard our entitlement in the lower basin. We are entitled to this. And we don't feel like you have a right to something that is not there. There's not an entitlement to something that is not there. We know that because we live that way, right up here. So I looked at, I follow the numbers from the Bureau of Reclamation on water rights and things like that. They have more rights than there is the river. In many cases, they have more rights than is even half the river. And so I think we have to remember that. I was thinking about Rebecca, it is right. Talking about CAP coming up here, and I think it was a good experience. Central Arizona Project coming up and learning. I think we have to continue to help them learn. I think we have to continue to help everyone learn in the lower basin. And the reason I say that is because they had just been up here and saw that, oh, we have to often cut off senior water rights. People know that up here, that we cut off often more senior than 1922. I was just listening to their last board meeting of Central Arizona Project, and I was like, I really wish they had learned a little bit more when they came up here, because one of the final statements was in regards to what can we engineer to get more water? And that was an ask from their board to their staff. And the staff who was up here responded, there is an uncomfortableness with getting below the bypass tubes in Glen Canyon Dam by the Bureau of Reclamation. There's 4 million acre feet below those bypass tubes that we have to figure out how to access. So while I appreciate the intention to learn, I think we need to, that's just an example of what we're dealing with on the big picture. And so I wish they had come up on a year that was dry. I wish they had come up and saw the pain that is seen on the ground on a daily basis. That was not the case this year when they came up. But it is going to take all of us to make sure that these lessons and messages get out there. And I do think they have some hard choices in front of them. Am I boring? I do think that it's going to take all of us. And these are hard choices that they have in front of them. They have to make them. But where I see the role of especially Colorado is that we are created around variability. Our communities are created around variability and we respond to it. And so where I think we can be helpful is teaching that. We have to be careful showing them the great water year. I'm just kidding. It didn't clear us out of all of this, but what I'm hoping we can show them is how to do more when less, especially when it's not there, and being responsive. So I wanted to bring that up. And then really make sure to talk about, you can go to the next one. And I never go off script. I'm never on this script, but I want to make sure that I'm going to introduce Allison to come up and give a little bit of a 101. And the reason why is I sit up and I speak on behalf of the entire state. And that's a complicated position to be in. There's multiple interests, we can go back and talk about East Slope, West Slope divide. And if we think that's helpful right now, I would ask us to really look inside and say, can we hold off those battles until we get through this negotiation? But I want to make sure that we find ways to stand together, because that's going to be the most important thing coming up, especially over these next couple of years. That being said, I'm going to have Allison give a little bit of a 101. And I said this last night to another group. It's everyone in these water rooms knows the compact, knows their agreements. They know how water operates. It's not to be offensive or anything like that. It's just to kind of make sure you know how we're speaking about the Colorado River Compact, the issues within Colorado. If there's something that you see as an incredible flaw, which I don't ever see from the Attorney General's office, by the way. But if you see something that you're saying, hey, maybe there's a better way to present it, if you're presenting to the lower basin states or other upper basin states, it's really to make sure we're all, you all are able to see how we view things and how we're portraying things also. So I'm gonna invite Allison to come up. Then I'm going to get back into the nitty-gritty details that you guys want to talk about and go. Hey, Allison, awesome. You don't even have to come up, or you can sit there, whatever you are. Okay, I can't see Patrick.
I'll hear.
Okay. Well, first of all, my name is Allison Meyer-Gould. I am with the Colorado Attorney General's office, and it's really nice to be here in person because I do know many of you, and it's just great to see people in real life. So thank you so much for having us. So as an attorney, of course, I have to start off my presentation with a disclaimer. The views expressed in this presentation are solely those of the author and do not represent the official position of the Colorado Department of Law, the Colorado Attorney General, or the state of Colorado. Okay, so the law of the river includes many documents. All are interrelated and inextricably intertwined. Today, I am not even going to attempt to talk about all of them. I just want to focus on what I'm calling the big three, the first three up there on the slide. I can do a much longer presentation, including the functional core, but I will not today. So let's start with the Colorado River Compact of 1922. The second is the Treaty with Mexico in 1944. And the third, of course, is the Upper Colorado River Basin Commission in 1948. I'm sorry, Compact. Next slide, please. All right, so let's start off with some basics. What is a compact? A compact is essentially a contract between states. A contract is authorized by Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution. Compacts are ratified by both state legislatures as well as Congress. In so doing, they become both state law and federal law. Compacts are special for many reasons, and one of them is that if they're authorized by Congress, the federal government is ceding what would otherwise be within its sovereign authority to another sovereign, that is the state. The Colorado River Compact is actually the first interstate water compact. It was devised by a gentleman by the name of Delph Carpenter, who was an attorney, actually from Greeley. Mr. Carpenter argued on behalf of Colorado in the U.S. Supreme Court case, Colorado versus Wyoming, on the Laramie River, and he lost. After this experience, he did not believe that the U.S. Supreme Court was the best place to reach a fair outcome, and that a compact was a far better way to address the issues in the Colorado River Basin. In particular, Mr. Carpenter was concerned that there would be an inter-basin or interstate priority system between the states. This was a concern because California was already far ahead of every other state in terms of facing Colorado River water to beneficial use. So what does the Colorado River Compact actually say?
Speak up a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've got one of those voices. Okay. Andy, give me a wave.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
It's online, so speak to the owl.
Okay. First, it defines the Colorado River system, which is the Colorado River and its tributaries. Second, it divides the right to beneficially use Colorado River water between the states of the upper basin and the lower basin in perpetuity. Third, it apportions from the Colorado River system to the upper basin the exclusive beneficial use of 7.5 million acre-feet per year. Fourth, it apportions from the Colorado River system to the lower basin the exclusive right to use 7.5 million acre-feet per year, plus an additional 1 million acre-feet per year for its tributaries. There's been much discussion over the last several years about the 1922 compact. Some say that because the compact allocated volumes of water, 7.5 million acre-feet to each of the basins, plus another 1 million acre-feet to the lower basins, 16 million acre-feet in total. And because those amounts are no longer present in the basin, certainly not for the last 23 years and perhaps never again, the compact itself should be thrown out and we should simply start over. But that is not the whole story. To truly understand the compact, it has to be read as a whole. It was never intended to be cherry-picked or have one provision stand on its own. Articles 3A and 3B divided all of the waters in the Colorado River system equally and in perpetuity, so that we in the upper basin can develop at our own pace and not be in a race with California. And frankly, that race would have been lost in 1922. Next slide, please. If you read on, you see that the compacts have provisions that allow for flexibility as to the set volumetric apportionments and allow for adaptations to variable and dry hydrology. For instance, Article 3C contains the United States obligation to Mexico, which is not defined in the compact, but acts as a placeholder. The compact does provide that this obligation is to be first met from surplus water over and above the beneficial consumptive uses apportioned in Articles 3A and B. So for the lower basin, that would be above the 8.5 million acre feet. Feel free to consult your very colorful basin map. Some diagrams on the bottom to compare that. At a minimum, before the upper division states are required to deliver any water at Leaf Ferry to satisfy their half of the obligation to Mexico, 3 things have to happen. First, the surplus must be insufficient to satisfy Mexico's right. Second, the deficiency must be recognized. And third, the delivery must be necessary. Also consider Article 3D, which provides the states of the upper division that they shall not cause the flow of the river at Leaf Ferry to be depleted below an aggregate of 75 million acre feet for any period of 10 years, so a 10-year rolling average. This is not a delivery obligation. This was one of the most, if not the most important aspects for Mr. Carpenter. He knew that the hydrology in the Colorado River Basin was highly variable, and he was concerned that if the upper division states had to provide a fixed 7.5 million acre feet every year, the upper division states could be in violation of the treaty even within year 1. So instead, he insisted on flexibility to provide an average over 10 years and not a delivery, but a commitment not to cause the flows to be depleted. This protects the upper division states from having to curtail because of a drought that the upper division states do not have control over. So before finding the upper division states have failed to meet the non-depletion obligation to the lower basin, there would need to be an inquiry into what actually caused the flows to drop below 75 million acre feet over 10 years. In other words, if there's less water in the system because of a drought or climate change, and the upper division states have not exceeded their apportionment, under the compact, the upper division states are not the cause of the depleted flows. So, big picture, what did we get out of the Colorado River Compact, and why is it good for the upper division states in Colorado? Next slide, please. This is Del Carpenter. The shorter answer is some very important things. First, it reduced the risk of interstate litigation because it was a negotiated agreement. Second, we do not have to apply an interbasin or interstate priority system. Third, it recognized that variable hydrology in the upper basin would impact the flows at Leaf Ferry. And fourth, the Mexico Treaty obligation is initially meant to be met by surplus. Next slide, please. All right, so let's now turn to the second of the big 3, which is the Mexico Treaty of 1944. And yes, that was the last year of World War II. Some very interesting history there. This treaty guarantees Mexico an annual quantity of 1.5 million acre feet. If a system surplus exists, the amount can increase 200,000 acre feet up to 1.7 million acre feet. In the event of an extraordinary drought, this allotment can be reduced in proportion to the reduction of uses within the US. However, the treaty does not exactly define extraordinary drought. The treaty also establishes the International Boundary and Water Commission, the IBWC, to implement the treaty, and there are a number of minutes. And these minutes further define the treaty, but they do not change it. Next slide, please. All right, next I'll go into the Upper Colorado River Basin Compact from 1948. This is the last. And it is necessary in order to gain congressional authorization for funding for upper basin storage. This compact further apportioned the waters under the 1922 compact among the upper division states in percentages of total water supplies in a given year. So for Colorado, we have 51.75%. Under full supply, that's 3.86 million acre feet per year. But say if 6 million acre feet is available, then Colorado would have about 3.1 million acre feet, and so on. New Mexico was allotted 11.25%, Utah 23%, and Wyoming 14%. Next slide, please. The Upper Colorado Compact also created the Upper Colorado River Commission, which we refer to as the UCRC. The UCRC is comprised of one governor's representative from each signatory state. We have ours here today, and one federal commissioner appointed by the President of the United States. The UCRC is an interstate administrative agency that administers the Upper Basin Compact because the obligations in both the Colorado River Compact and the Upper Basin Compact are shared among the states. This makes it unique in comparison with other compacts in which Colorado is a signatory, where there may be some sort of delivery obligation to the state line or something similar. That is not the case here. One thing that the compact does not do is give the UCRC authority to control in-state compact administration. That is up to the individual states. Next slide, please. And to sum things up, these three documents created the foundation of the laws, agreements, and decrees that we all call the law of the river. And there's a lot more out there. This is some of them. The law of the river allows for a balance to be struck between certainty for water planning and the flexibility to adapt to changing conditions. For the last 100 years, this framework has allowed for the growth and development of the Southwest that now drives a $1.4 trillion per year economy in the region. Each generation of the Colorado River Basin water managers and water users that have come before us have faced their own challenges. But each time they recognize the value and the stability that the law of the river provided. And so they found ways to work within it, to bend without break. There continues to be ample opportunity today to find flexibility in the existing legal framework to tackle our generation's challenges in the face of increasing demands and climate change. Thank you.
So Allison did a great job kind of going through a bit of the history. I want her to feel welcome to come here again. So maybe I baited that a little bit. I think what I hope you saw from that is how critically important post 2026 is. I hope you also saw that we're getting ready. We are ready. And we think we have a lot of the things in place, the arguments that are going to be needed to really push the folks to move forward and do more. As we talk about kind of what's happened in the past, what's happened even over these last couple of years, I think it's really important to recognize what post 2026 is about. This is the opportunity for not just Colorado to do better, but the entire basin to do better for the basin. And so we're trying to keep our eye on the prize, and that's sustainable reservoir operations. And we have to acknowledge the reason why we found ourselves in this place. But what I'm seeing across the country is a tiredness of crisis to crisis management. I don't think that's responsible management, to be perfectly honest. If you run any water utility, water conservancy district, whatever it is, crisis to crisis management is not responsible. So it's going to take courage. It's going to take leadership. And it's with real leadership, you have to have an extraordinary amount of courage. I think we are trying to be courageous in the upper basin. It's going to take even more courage from the lower basin because they're going to have to take some big hits. And so the status quo, there is just so you all are aware, you've probably heard in the news, oh, maybe we decommission Glen Canyon. Maybe it's just tweaks to the reservoir tier structures. Maybe there is some level of balancing that could still be in there. Do you guys know what balancing is in the 07 guidelines? Essentially, the way that the 07 guidelines were structured was so that if Mead went to a certain elevation, depending on the tier of Powell and depending on the tiers of Mead, that more could be pulled out of Powell over whatever amount, 7.5, 8.23, 9, 9.5 up to. So there is an incentive almost to continue to pull water from Mead because it pulls more water out of Powell. And so I would hope at the end of tonight, you say, balancing may not be the best thing, or what are the boundaries on that we need to stand by as a state to make sure that we're doing the right thing. I think the last couple of years have been real tough, but when you look at this, I don't think we did this because we like orange and yellow and blue and red colors and people don't know where the states are. What we did was to try to really simplify it, and you look at those colors and numbers, and I think they tell the story, right? They tell the story about our uses as the red flags were coming from Mother Nature that said, don't have water. You see our uses go down. They're indirect response to hydrology. At the same time, you see the uses go up in the lower basin. Oh, sorry. Yeah. You see the uses go up in the lower basin. And so when we talk about responsible management, I think seeing the signs and being responsive is responsible management. This year, the request came in, the lower basin tried to push for 9.5 release from Powell this year. It got, there was an agreement to go down to 9. You guys open the newspaper and the news. That was within the guidelines. So what that said to me was that there's no time like the present to start pushing better guidelines, and better guidelines that are responsive to what the river is telling, right? We didn't cause this problem. These numbers show that. You heard Allison talk about the causation. We're not using more than half the river. We're not doing something to inhibit 7.5, right? We don't have, this also tells me when you look at these numbers, inflows, there is not enough water up here to bail out bad management. There is not enough water in the upper basin to bail out the lower basin. There's not enough water to continue status quo. And so we've got to make a decision as a state, but as an entire basin, are we going to continue this or not? I mean, we can't really. I mean, the water's not there. And so I want to emphasize a point that Allison talked about, and it's that we have equal rights to the Colorado River. And those numbers in the compact can be distracting. And what I was hoping you would yell out when she said some people want to renegotiate the compact, I was hoping you would yell out, boo, no, hell no, whatever. Curse if you want, because you should be cursing about some of this, right? But the essence of the compact was that equal division. And I think we have to stand by that. And that's in times of plenty. That's also in times of low. And I think that's what this slide shows, that you've seen, that this has not been a reality of how our water's been used. That slide makes me cry sometimes. It should make all of you. Like, I mean, it just, when you look at, I consider it basic math. When 8 out of the last 10 years, more has left Powell than has entered. So you have a couple big bumper years, but 8 out of 10 years, more has left Powell than has entered. What about the 10 years before that? Same. 8 out of 10 years, more has left Powell than has entered. Why are we having dropping reservoirs? Who knows? Like, come on. A crisis, we have a crisis at hand. Some of this is, you can't continue on this and then cry that there's a crisis coming. And so I think, you know, we're looking at, when you talk about those equal apportionments on the river, this tells the story, right? And this tells the story, and it tells the story over again. To fully understand how the lower basin's overuse led to the collapse of both Mead and Powell, I think it's important to understand how those guidelines work. And that's what I talked about with that balancing. They operate in concert pursuant to the guidelines. And so nobody's broken the law. So we can't call law breaking yet. And in the defense of the 07 guidelines creators, I have to say that there was a 3% chance we'd see the hydrology that we're seeing these last 20 years. So I don't want to say, what were those fools thinking? There was a 3% chance, but the guidelines didn't offer that off-ramp or a flag that said, somebody throw the flag on the field and say, this isn't working. Instead, it was like, let's continue to drain. So it doesn't take any engineer type of scientist to understand that this is a problem. I've talked to young kids. I talked to my partner at home. He's a pilot. And he gets it. You know, this is common sense. We have to do things differently moving forward. I think I'm probably going to the next slide. So maybe even the next one after that. No, right here. Perfect. So I want to take a minute to talk about probably what you guys allowed me to come here for. And to talk about kind of the latest and greatest and the 5-point plan. I think you all recall June 22nd or June 2022, the Bureau of Reclamation Commissioner called for 2 to 4 million acre feet in conservation. Do you think they just pulled that number out of their head or out of their hat? No, there was a reason, because that was the number that was needed. This year provided a little reprieve, but that number was real. And what you saw from the previous slides, what I hope you've gotten from my talk is that when you're in a year where you're using 3.5 million total across 4 upper basin states, we'd have to give up everything to save them, to save 2 to 4 million. That's not reasonable, especially when it's overuse. And so you probably know about you've probably seen some of the things prior to maybe the upper basin getting more coordinated. I was hearing things on the level of, oh, let's all look at this. The upper basin can help. You know, they don't want to do anything. What about demand management? There was one meeting I was in that said, how can we do anything? You won't even do demand management. And I nearly climbed across the table. But when the commissioner said 2 to 4 million acre feet, I walked into a meeting and give a little bit of, you know, behind the scenes, what was happening. I walked into a meeting, and because of hydrology, there had finally been an acknowledgement. We're going to have to do something. And so a proposal was made. We'll come up with 2 million acre feet. Will you guys do these things? There's your 5-point plan. There was 6. We told them no one thing, and that was development caps. I said, get out of the room. And so, but they said, we know we have to come up with 2 million acre feet. So part of the 5-point plan, the first one was system conservation pilot program. Will you re-initiate that? Well, we can try. Demand management feasibility investigation, continued work with that. Drought response operations agreement. And then there was some funding, and we used it for measuring and monitoring, and use the funding actually for things that we needed to do on the ground, and use that money in a good way. And the last one I think is the most important, because I think this is the best thing that we do, and I'm glad to see Aaron Light on here. But the continued strict administration according to priority. And the reason I emphasize that one is because seems like it's common sense, we do that. That's not the case in the lower basin. And so I think that's something we'd like to see everywhere. And one of the things, I got a lot of critique on many of these things. And I want to talk about two of them specifically before I leave this slide. One, drought response operations agreement. When the system was crashing and it was in the news every day, it's not always about science. It's sometimes about policy. It's about politics. There's a lot going on, right? And so drought response operations agreement is essentially looking at upper basin reservoirs to keep from getting into those critical elevations. At the time that this was coming out, what had just happened was the Bureau or Department of Interior made an emergency call on Blue Mesa and Flaming Gorge and Navajo. And what that was not in coordination with the other states. They gave us 8 days notice. 8 days notice. Let me tell you when it was. Right before Labor Day. If you've ever been to the Gunnison Basin, if you've ever been around Blue Mesa, if you've ever been around Blue Mesa on Labor Day weekend, that weekend is responsible for 25% of their recreational income in the community over the summer. And so when they dropped Blue Mesa about 31,000 acre feet, that might be the biggest reservoir in Colorado. What that did was essentially shut down that weekend. That weekend was done. That marina operator, 30-year operator at Blue Mesa, that was a family in the Gunnison Valley that had been operating that marina for 30 years. They're gone. Because of one decision made. And so that decision has been the gift that keeps on giving and not in a good way. And so the next year, that marina was still gone. And so at the time where this was all happening, these kinds of decisions were being made. And there was a great fear that there would be this overreach and that we'd have less and less control over what we could do and how to respond. And I consider it scope creep. Once the feds come up one time, what happens the next one? What about after the initial units? And we're all affected by that. So what the intention was that 5-point plan was really to say, we're willing, but also what we can't do more, we can't save you. Also, when I talk about the SCPP, that was 22 contracts in Colorado to get less than 3,000 acre feet. Took 22 contracts. Anybody who has done a contract or reviewed or analyzed a contract knows the effort and work it takes to do that. 22 contracts. We don't have 10 main contractors out of Meade. You know how water works in the upper basin. It's multiple little ditches, little users. It is communities pulling together. Took 22 contracts to get about 2,500 acre feet of water. So a lot of work. But it did say, this is a lot of work. And you also can't squeeze water from a rock, fools. Like you can't. We can't continue this. And the part of the reason it may have been different had it been a drought year, what it looked like. And so the decision is out here right now. And the reason it's really good that I'm here this week because we've got to make a decision pretty quickly of what we do with SCPP again. And if we do this again. And don't forget, Blue Mesa's still in my head. Don't forget, like, we don't know what's gonna happen next year or the year after. And it takes one crisis, and we're still operating under these guidelines, unfortunately. I have to operate under these guidelines through 2026. So they end in the end of 25, but we operate under, that's through the 2026 season. And so that's there. And so we're in this place where I have to make a decision on what we do with SCPP. There's a lot of money out there at the same time. I'm pretty fiscally conservative, and I really like money to be spent in a very directed and boundary sort of way. That's rough when there's crisis in the news all the time. But we're at a place where we have to make a decision. You saw, I sit on that UCARC with 3 other states. 3 other states have the governor's reps sitting there. In the last UCRC meeting, all 3 of them indicated that they were going to move forward with SCPP, that they would like to move forward with another round of SCPP. And I basically said I was still undecided. I needed to talk to the people. And I ask you guys to think for a second, put yourself in my shoes. 3 states say yes. I have a couple choices. One being, I say no. And shut it down for all of them. And I have to go into negotiations. The 4 of our states have to be aligned, or the lower basin, California and Arizona. If these 4 upper basin states don't stand together, we're not going to be able to stand at all, because we will get toppled over. The biggest strength that we've had is that these 4 upper basin states are standing aligned. So Colorado could say no and screw it for the rest of them. They want to do it. Some of the projects in New Mexico went to the Navajo. The biggest contract they had was the biggest one was the Navajo Indian Reservation. Utah and Wyoming are all on board. They even supplemented their SCPP funding. So there's that. That's a lovely position to be in. And then there's another option. I could say no for Colorado, but you guys go ahead. That's how I keep thinking about Blue Mesa at that point. And that's a really rough one. The other alternative out there is, let's look at what we could do that kind of put some boundaries on SCPP, really strong boundaries. And what are our long-term goals with anything that we do in Colorado? Keep in mind what I said was, let us do, we only want to do things that are for us. I don't want to do anything in Colorado that is promotion of overuse or helps facilitate it or enables it. And so what if we put some boundaries on it? I already know the answer. For me personally, no to the way that we did it last year. And so I want to say that pretty clearly. But there was another option put out there, and I want to make sure you all know I haven't made a decision on this. One option that was put out there was a very defined SCPP. That is not that is about learning lessons, whether that's and very focused on that. If there's irrigation efficiencies that need to be done, this would provide the ability to do that. You would have to show that. You'd have to show that. If you wanted to try an alternative cropping and see what came out of that, it would have to show that. It would have to provide a lesson that we need right now, to go into something greater for our state. We can't commit and won't commit of getting it to PAL because we don't have a way to do that. But can we gain some benefit from it? And then the other piece of it that I've committed to, if we choose to go forward with it, is an extreme greater amount of transparency. We're looking at the way to do that. The other states have not made that commitment, so I would be doing that solo. There's always repercussions when one commissioner does something different than the other. That's okay. I'm okay with that if it's the right thing to do. And so that is the place that we're at right now, as it relates to SCPP. And I don't know, it hasn't been an enjoyable year for me, as it relates to this. It's been rough. But the part of the reason I wanted to talk about it more than my talking points show and more than the slideshow was so that you knew where I was coming from when I made this decision. And so that you knew what is being thought about. It's not just about one decision. It's not just about, is this the smartest thing right now? It's about, okay, we have relationships. We have initial units. We need to be seen as leaders, and or we will be walked on. And so that is why I spent a little bit of extra time on it, because I know this area especially was concerned. So I wanted to make sure you knew that. And I will save questions for the end, if that's okay. Can you go to the next slide? Go through this one. So go to the next one. We're good. I think I want to talk a bit about my priorities going forward. And if some of these are offensive to you, like, let's talk about it. If they're not, I like to hear support too. I didn't just, again, these weren't just developed in the vacuum. Like this came from conversations. This came from, you know, when we talked about the 400 pages of work that went to the drought task force earlier, that work doesn't just fall on deaf ears. Like, we use it to build the foundation of what we're doing. So, as we talk about the principles for post-2026 negotiations, and these are already changing a little bit based on conversations I'm hearing on the ground, but I'm going to tell you the way I've been presenting them the last couple weeks, but probably by next month, they may evolve even a little bit more based on what I'm hearing. So the first one is that climate change is real. And this one is interesting. I got a little bit of feedback on this one last night, so I'm interested to hear if you guys want to throw anything at me or not. This isn't, I've heard both sides of this. Take this out, dumbest thing ever. No, you need to emphasize this more. This isn't really about, this isn't the political argument about it. This is the acknowledgement that there's going to be variability. Sometimes extreme variability. Variability beyond what we expected, variability beyond what they expected in 2007. And what this is saying is, get your crap in check and respond to that. Like, we cannot pretend, we cannot live with the river we hope for and dream about. We have to live with the river we have. And we do that. Like, we do that. And so that's where this one comes. And so we have to plan around that variability and create flexibility and ability to adapt. The second, and if you guys don't cheer this one, I'm going to be really upset. Like, you probably are going to have to get kicked out of the room, but because I think others will kick you out, not me. But it's recognizing that water users in the lower basin are not more important than water users in the upper basin.
Oh, yeah.
So this should go without saying, but the CAP meeting notes signify to me, let's dig deeper. 4 million acre feet below the penstocks is your answer to the problem. What that tells me is that you're not really looking at the problem. The problem isn't digging deeper or finding a lower drain. or putting the bypass tubes lower. The problem is you need to change your use and how you use and when you use. And so, we're in this situation because of the lower basin overuse. If you look at what our numbers would be, what our reservoir elevations would be at if just 7.5 million acre-feet was released, even 8 million acre-feet released from Powell. I would never mention that out loud anyplace else, but we'd be at like 3670 in Powell. That's certainty, right? That's responsibility. That's responsible water management. That's where we would be. So be as mad at me as you want on SCPP. That's what I'm defending. And so as we go, this kind of ties to the next point, is that we have to find ways that prevent overuse in the lower basin. I often say the most kindness I can give is setting clear boundaries of what I will not move on. And for me, this is one of those. The second one is the other. Like, if you think that you're more important than us, there has been pushes to come up. Could we pay for this? And you could send this water down to Powell and it would be earmarked. No, that's not allowed. That's not allowed. I actually made my movement goal just now. Apparently I paced a lot. So that overuse has to stop. The other thing, and I was so glad to hear Doug talk about this, and T, right, about defending against attempts at compact curtailment in the upper division states. We are not near meeting that 75/10. In fact, I think it's like 88 right now is our running 10-year average. There's a lot of things that would happen before we would have to curtail on the ground. But for me, that is something that's critically important moving forward. You can go to the next one. And the reasons we talked about, all the things that we did legally was so that you guys would understand also where we start seeing our arguments if there was ever an inkling that that's where anybody was going. That doesn't mean there can't be federal overreach in upper basin reservoirs. So we sometimes have to do some other things. The other thing is operating in Lake Powell and Lake Mead to respond to hydrology and available water supplies. That kind of goes back to that climate change one. We need, again, not operate based on what we hope is there, what we need, but what is actually there. And so that's one of the things that I'm thinking is incredibly important. I hope you all do too, because I'm really tired of being in the news or reading about the Colorado River in the news. We're not going to move away from this crisis unless we start looking at how to respond to actual hydrology. The other piece is preserving federal water rights for tribal nations. I know up in this corner, you may not be as aware of this, but there are two federally recognized tribes, the Southern Ute and Ute Mountain Ute, that are in Colorado that have rights on the Colorado River. Those have not been fully developed. There's a federal trust responsibility that has not been fulfilled. There is desire to develop, or there's a desire to be able to make sure to preserve those rights to go into the future. But we all know what happened. We all know what happens if people don't use their water rights and they make it to Powell. Somebody else is making money off of them. And the longer that goes on, the less likely there will be any movement on that. So the longer there is money focused, and I call it the reliance. They've built a reliance on something that isn't theirs and isn't there. And so as long as that reliance is there, there's going to be a push to not develop. whether that's us as a state, whether that's the tribes, anybody upstream. There will, I was at a CRUA or a conference at some point, and one of the lower basin states said, any upper basin development puts the whole system at risk. That, I mean, I didn't handle it well. I wish I had been more graceful in my response to that. I was just like, shut up, was pretty much my response. But because I feel like it's common sense, but that message gets out and we're being presented as the ones that are putting this system at risk. And what's put the system at risk is that reliance on something that isn't theirs and isn't there. And I think that's important to remember. I don't think I have anything else really, nor but I want to take comments and questions. Is it okay if I send it to you first? Just be brief on this and then we can take comments. I prefer discussion rather than presentation, but I'm told I have to do these presentations. And so, but I would prefer if next time or at any point, I'll sit down with any of you guys. If you have boards, commissions, wherever you want me, I will be there and we can have discussion. So do you want to ask that question now or do you want to wait till Emily's done? Okay, and then we'll do all the hammering me at the end.
And my commitment will be to be the fastest speaker you've had this evening, because I am standing between you and questions of the commissioner, but also you and your bedtimes. So we will be succinct. I think, our goal today was to 101 on the Wapiti River and give you a better sense of where Becky's coming from and what's going on in the basin. So then the next very reasonable question is, how can I be involved? What can I do? This matters to me. It matters to my livelihood. So where can I leave my fingerprint on this? And we've heard that. We really want to make sure that Becky is in a position where she's representing Colorado. And to do so requires input from water users across the basin. So I wanted to walk through a couple of ways, 6 ways that we thought the Basin Roundtables could be involved. This is by no means a prescription. It's no means a request. If you have different ideas, different options, please go home, think about it, bring it back. We just wanted to put something out there for you all to respond to. Also, we'd love to get your feedback and thoughts in general. And so don't feel restricted to this evening or the Basin Roundtable itself. So the first is sharing ways to adapt to shortage. This has come up in multiple presentations this evening. If people don't hear Coloradan stories, then we're not helping shape that basin-wide narrative. And Coloradans lead in what it means to adapt to shortage. We have good years, we have bad years. The second one is PEPO and water education. I think especially coming from the Front Range, there are a lot of people who live in Colorado who have no idea what it means to be in the arid West, an emphasis on that arid piece. We live in a dry place. I come from Vancouver, British Columbia, where it rains 300 days a year. That is not the case here. So really emphasizing for people who don't live and breathe water, what it means to live in our climate. Encouraging your basin to provide input. Some of you might know before I came to the state, I worked as a public policy facilitator. And so I linked people's voices to the decisions being made. And my biggest takeaway from that role was that the voices tend to be the loudest 10%. You get the 10% over here and the 10% over here, which means that 80%, the vast majority of people who aren't at the extremes, who aren't the loudest, don't get heard. They tend to get overlooked and the attention gets focused on those extremes. So to ensure that Becky's actually representing the majority of Coloradans, it's so important that one, the Basin Roundtable is representing all of your voices, but also that you're relaying the voices that you hear in your local communities here and then up to the commissioner. What do you support? What would you encourage Becky with? What's a concern? What do you take issue with? These are the questions that really help us represent Colorado. We'll go to the next slide. And this is my quick pitch for the commissioner corner. This page here is a screen grab of Engage CWCD. And I know providing input online can feel like tossing words into a void. I promise your input here goes directly to my inbox where I do read it. I provide a summary for Becky and Amy and we track it in an input tracking sheet. on topics and sensitive matters. Is someone trying to cut in? Okay, I promise to be fast. We also have the Commissioner Corner, which is on our CWCB official government page, and Jeff will drop the link in the chat. He did. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff keeps us on track. That we update every single month, and we aim for a Wikipedia style update. So longer than a tweet, shorter than a newspaper article, and we update it at the end of every month, and it's focused on what Becky's been doing. So next slide, and I promise this is the end. The 3 other ways that we thought the Basin Roundtables could be involved or might be interested in being involved. Water plan actions, and we already heard a little bit tonight about your grant program and things that are happening, from storage to riparian recovery to thriving agriculture. And the more Coloradans can do to show that we're adapting to the variable river, the more Becky can walk into those negotiations and say, here's what my water users have done. What have yours done? And that equips her. And I think it goes back to that first point of sharing your stories of shortage, but also sharing how you've adapted. And that really matters. It provides case study, it provides evidence, and it gives Becky something concrete. She's an engineer. She likes facts and she likes evidence. Building unity across the Basin Roundtables. And I have to give you all a big shout out. This is our 4th or 5th Basin Roundtable presentation, and I highlight you all. I think this Basin Roundtable has done an excellent job of getting out across the state and connecting with different Basin Roundtables, engaging with water users, and saying, here's what we think. What do you think? And I'll try not to stare at you two, but I think you've had a key role in that. I'll look over here for discrepancy. So I think one thing that you've done really well is breaking down kind of the natural divides that just happen when people live in their little silos, that us versus them narrative, and looking at finding areas of alignment without necessarily shying away from things we disagree about. Finally, advocating for thoughtful action when it's most needed. And this came up a little bit earlier today. Action is important. And sometimes we feel like we need to do things just because we're antsy. And the Basin Roundtables are a natural forum for saying, whoa, 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 do we actually need to do something? Is this the right action? How can we facilitate as much buy-in as possible? And then finally, is this addressing the actual problem? And to paraphrase Becky, the actual problem is in the lower basin. If the action is not reducing an over-reliance on the reservoirs, is it solving the problem? And so with that, we'll go to our final slide, which has a QR code, even though Jeff has already given you the Commissioner's Corner. You can always reach out to us. We work more than just Basin Roundtable hours, I promise. I have put the DNR_Colorado River at state.co.us. This goes directly to my inbox and Amy's inbox. And I've also put Amy's email address up there because she's not here person to say no. So you're welcome to reach out to both of those accounts. And then one thing that we've been offering to different Basin Roundtables, it's totally up to you. We're happy to give a standing update with the CWCB update that Jeff usually provides, and then Director Brown, of course. So if it's of interest, we'll make ourselves available to you all. But otherwise, just let us know when or if you ever want to see us again. So that was the end. I think we can take questions with Becky. Yeah.
T-Right, you've had your hand raised for a long time.
Thank you, Steve. And I first want to address the lady that was just speaking. I apologize, I missed her name, but I wanted a gentle admonition. I really understand that the majority of Coloradans don't understand these issues. And I, in all of what we've done in this roundtable, and myself in my entire history has been trying to be part of helping educate folks. But in the decisions that Becky and others are making, you need to listen to those of us who have followed this and do know. And that's why with Jeff and Ken and Tom Gray's help, the Big River Committee, and I know this roundtable stands ready to be at your side as you go through these. I just want you to understand that you need to listen to informed informed recommendations. Becky, I want to cheer you, and I want to give you my Atta Commissioner Award tonight in your enthusiasm. The biggest thing in this whole thing has always been the lower basin's overuse. I don't have to be as Christian as you. The 07 interim guidelines, and I understand the politics that created them. But that balancing is grand theft, nothing less. And anything that we can do to highlight, and even while we have to live with those in the interim, daylight what's wrong and why those, this is a crisis solely of poor public policy in those interim guidelines, and we agree on that entirely. The point in here is the state, the upper basin states, you need to hang tough, because of that 88 million rolling average. We all know you hold the ultimate high card. They can't call us out, and they're going to physically run out of water before, and they know it. And you don't have to be unchristian about it, but they do need to know that we're damn serious about it. And because you really hold the high cards. In regards to the SCP, from my standpoint, Utah and Wyoming were wrong, are absolutely wrong in this SCP. And I'm going to personally encourage you to just say no on this, as difficult as it is. I have a neighbor who participated in this because of financial reasons, and I get it. But the public policy that I have to learn from was the farm crisis of the 80s. And with CRP, we saved farmers and we killed all the communities on the eastern slope. And you had a point there in maybe a way of making some lemonade out of this. And I think it has some real merit in the construct. If these go forward, you got to have some knowledge or deliverables out of them. I am very concerned. The big ones that have occurred by me over here on the Little Snake River in both Wyoming and Colorado, I believe that those are going to really have an impact on the return flows and the future flows of the Little Snake. And I've come through all of this, and I'm just in a just say no to the SCP deal, because it continues to fall on the backs of agriculture. In regards to the point about climate change, the climate variability, I think, is the byword you need to emphasize there. The 1,500 years of tree ring record that we've been studying in the basin, no one has showed me anything outside of the natural range of variability. But that we both know that natural range of variability is significant, and we're living proof of that. The last thing that I want to impart to you is an example that we learned out of the Flamin' Gorge, and with the releases down to Powell, because of the recovery program demands on Flamin' Gorge, Bureau Rec habitually gets caught with a full reservoir in wet years, and then has to spill or dump a bunch of water that we don't get to generate power revenues or anything. And it causes severe impact to us landowners down below Flamin' Gorge in both Colorado and Utah. But the point was, this year, Flamin' Gorge, because 2 years worth of water had been pulled out for the DROA, this year Flamin' Gorge actually got to act as a flood control and prevented flooding conditions in Green River City, Utah, which would have been flood stage there is 30,000 acre feet. And in this spring, it was being projected it would be at 34,000. And Flamin' Gorge actually got to hold back water and didn't augment the Yampa. And we've got to have some improvements. We've got to have some policy changes in regards to Flamin' Gorge to recognize the impacts that are occurring to landowners in Reach 1 and Reach 2. So thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for your enthusiasm, and keep at it.
Thank you, T. Wright. You're a better Christian than I am.
Jonathan?
I'm Jonathan Ballard. I'm the water master on the Savory Little Snake River Conservancy District. Those are my contracts up there. We had one project with 3 contracts, 2,200 acre feet of water. We have more water going down the Little Snake this year than we have in years, but that's because of the hydrologic conditions and how much water we poured out on the fields upstream throughout the entire high water season. And so it's not a year we can learn any lessons without SCDP. Being from Little Snake, we've got an entire section in of the Colorado River Compact that we get to play by. You know, that's how interesting we are up there. And I get to, you know, partake in both sides of the state line, but tell you, Wyoming's not on board for the next round. They're on the fence right now. They haven't made a decision. Utah is going to be on board because they're the prime beneficiary. Without shepherding, every drop of water conserved in Wyoming and Colorado goes into Utah headgates. So it's no question that they're going to support the program. But we saw, you know, in our program up there, there's a lot of money to be made, and like any ranch resource, that's something that people should have the ability to think about. You know, what do you do with your cattle? What do you do with your hay? What do you do with your water? But the way that program ran out, it only pays people not to do what they're good at. It doesn't do anything to help them learn to be better at it. And so when they're talking climate variability, if we're not teaching people to be adaptable and to be resilient, given any given situation, you said earlier, responsible management, looking at a situation and reacting to it in a timely manner. But we're not teaching people to do that with this program. And so if we're not able to practice adaptable water management, it's all or nothing, then we're offering a lower basin more than we have.
So if there was a way to make it so there was a teaching component of it, I think that's something I'm hearing. The other piece is that, trying to figure out the best way. Is there any press on? Probably not.
No.
Good. There's the interesting piece about SCPP, and I kind of alluded to it, but I didn't say it as directly as I'm about to, is that there's nothing that prohibits. If there's more in the river, it may end up going to the next water user within the individual state. And there could be some benefits about that. I think you're right though, about if we're not teaching resiliency, which I think we are the teachers of resiliency in Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, New Mexico. I think we are the teachers of that. But we need to learn more so we can even teach better. And so I'm hearing what you're saying is that there has to be a component of that. And so I'm going to take that into account, and I saw copious notes being taken. So I didn't write them as you were speaking, but I was making sure somebody was.
It's just as far as, you know, the specifics of that, we say we can serve 1.5 acre feet per acre on that project. And so using the EE metric modeling to determine, you know, consumptive use on field, you can only shut it off completely. But if we know that 1.5 acre feet per acre is what's conserved, you should be able to take after water, spread it out across the entire field, have the exact same on-field consumptive use, but still put half the water down the river. But it doesn't allow that. It doesn't even encourage that kind of use.
I think that's the intention, and so we may need to be in a closer contact in terms of what some of came out of the lessons learned from this last one. And just so you know, we were not expecting Congress to approve, like, that happened like like with the blink of an eye. Like, we were said, yeah, we'll do that, and then come to the end of the year, Washington DC, and good Washington DC forum was like, we're doing this, and it was in, and then we were stuck with this. Well, what do we do at kind of situation? And so one thing we learned for sure was that no heads up was not the way we were gonna do it. That's why we're saying we have to make a decision on this really soon. Like before October. Because if anybody's going to do this, that's the way it has to be, and there has to be enough time that other people around them can say, this may cause me injury or whatever that is. But also, I don't think it's worth the work if we don't learn something like what you're talking about. When I mentioned the 22 contracts and the amount of water, yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's the same thing. I've been thinking about the WSRF program. And when I first started at CWCD, there was a problem. And it's a little bit of a long story, but I'm gonna make it as quick as I can. Oftentimes people got to the end of the grant and we never got the final deliverable. Because they expended most of the funds and there was only 5% held out for the final deliverable. And that 5% sometimes was not enough to pay the consultant or whatever to do that final deliverable. And that was a real problem for me because I felt like these are public funds, right? And it's not just about the project, it's about the learning. And somebody else has to be able to learn from what you did. It's not just because they're state funds. The reason we're sitting here is because of state funds. Like, let's be honest, Russ George created this and attached the money to it because that's how people volunteer at 9:30 at night, is because there's some sort of money associated with it. But there's still a responsibility, and that is to be able to, that it can't be something that is just myopically for your specific situation. Somebody has to be able to take something from it and be better because of the work that you did, or be able to modify it and say, we learned something. And that was the intention with the WSRF, is to be able to say, and the same thing with the last SCPP. This didn't work. This was just about the money, or this, or this, and be able to be better. And so I think the intention is to be better in everything that we do. And so I hear what you're saying. We must learn from it, and it must be transferable learning. It can't be just for your farm. It has to be for the greater good piece of it. So that's the intention. If there's it with the lessons learned that came out, would be a program that's the target. Any other questions? I know that you guys are the choice of holding yourself back. Can I go to Ken and then Andy?
Well,
I'm here all night, so you guys will stay all night. We can have discussion all night. We can have the rougher conversation.
Thank you for being here.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. And I think you're doing a great job. And I think the group here is going to agree with you on your irrefutable truths and the rest of this stuff, with very few exceptions. Saying that though, I do think that there's probably some merit in using the extreme climate variability as a more widely accepted.
I'm hearing that, and I heard that last night too, and so that's why I gave a little bit of the caveat of what, and it kind of blends into the other the variability one, and so
we're supposed to plan for the worst, not the average or the norm, whatever it is.
Well, you're supposed to be able to take advantage of when it's good and be able to save it for a dry day, not a rainy day. And go from there. So, I'm hearing this loud and clear and we're gonna think about
One
how
of the
to.
things that you argued consistently is to live within your means, you know, that's kind of
Mhm.
buried all through this. I think the system conservation program flies right in the face of that. And for them to say, if you pay us enough money, like it's the latest alternative to be included in the environmental impact statement for the post 2026, to say that, oh, we need to have that, if you pay us enough money, we'll try to comply.
We'll
with
live
what we've
within the
already
means.
agreed to. That, I just think that it sends the wrong message to them, and of course, I know the river district is adamant about how important it is to see them live within their means, account for their hydrologic transit loss and evaporative loss. And so my final point is, Amy did a really nice job of showing us that simple bar chart. I mean, that's so easy to understand what the problem is. I'd love to see the same one showing just how much overuse they've had since 2027 or 2007.
Okay,
Because
can you write that down, Emily?
You know, they have been over their amount they needed. They've never applied the evaporative and transit loss, and we could show the
We
millions.
should
the
talk about
millions.
tributaries too.
Yeah, that, just a simple chart, and the tributaries, thank you.
Mhm.
That would really, I think, be another nail in that coffin.
I love these suggestions because this helps me develop like the information graphics on and what needs to be out there. Like we just kind of developed that, and because I was trying to figure out how do we talk about the simple math. You mentioned something about the lower basin overuse has to stop. I need your help on that because the specifically the money piece. You know, politicians and politicians everybody wants to be a part of the solution, right? Like we were the ones that did this or that. My push right now is please do not throw any more money at this until we see a plan. Devise the money that is needed based on a actual solid plan that results in real reductions below need. And nobody gets paid for conserving overused water that they've been overusing. You get paid if there's a really dry year and you need some carryover and you actually use less. When you start looking and mining out the mead releases, that's the story. That you can shuffle this water around, you can have this like smoke and mirrors of accounting through ICS, through conservation plans where they kind of take it from someplace else, but actually it's rained a lot this year down there. And so, you know, there's a lot going on there. And we need to hold people accountable when I consider them the American dollars that are going towards this, and people are asking for this crisis to be over. And to stop living from crisis to crisis, and we owe it to the people to cut the drama. And so where I need help is that, I need support to the senators and your Congress people to, you know, over the next year, we need to come up with a basin safe alternative to be analyzed in the NEPA process for the post 2026 operations. If a large bucket of money is developed, that doesn't help put the pressure on. I need there to be real pressure, and I'm getting a little bit worried about folks. We need the pressure to stay on just the way it is, and maybe even a little more. I got a comment from somebody that an advisor that said maybe you take the heat off now a little bit, Becky, and watch some of your language about the lower basin. And I said, oh no, I'm turning it up. Yeah. I'm turning it up now. Like we only have a little bit of time. We have to turn it up. And it's not a time to be pleasant. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to do right by Colorado. And so So that's where we're at right now with that. Andy?
Yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone. I got one last question here, and I'm gonna move away from system conservation and man management.
Yeah.
And this is very much a like Yampa, like derived and maybe a little bit unique, comment and request. And I made the same request to Senator Hickman, that we really had a chance to talk to him. We don't have any Bureau of Reclamation projects in our case. I think you and Mike are probably in the room when I asked them not to come pay us a visit about a year ago.
Yeah.
I may want to amend that now, but for a different reason. You know, traditionally they've built reservoirs, right? I would like to amend that and offer them an invitation to come pay us a visit to help us with our biggest reservoir, which is the natural environment that provides our hydrologic health and well-being. And my request to Hickman was to try to somehow engineer, encourage the Department of Interior as represented by Reclamation and the Department of Agriculture as represented by Forest Service and NRCS to start working together for the Bureau of Reclamation to come up here and help us with our forest health and our declining returns on hydrology.
You need to get with the Southwest Basin on that too, because that's a big initiative there. Partly because they've been so heavily impacted by the forest fires and so they've been able to see the impact, not just on quality, but on quantity.
Yeah.
And defining that and the engineering behind it, the impacts of forest health on the quantity, it's been a struggle. And the science on that is still behind. I don't have enough time to figure out the quantity part, but I have been trying to push those conversations. There's sometimes I was like, gosh, I wish I was an engineer again, and I could just stab behind a computer and like be a dork. And I miss those days because I would love that kind of work, because I think there is a heavy quantity connection, and we just have not been able to get the science to say, if we treat our forest this way, we will be better for it. Not just because of quality, but we may have more and we may have a more resilient future. So I will push that. Still be careful of biting them up. Invite with boundaries.
Huh?
I'm here all night, Tom. I mean, everybody can leave, we can chat as long as you want.
Yeah, so I've got some announcements today. You want to hold your question?
No, I want to ask while we're on the subject.
Yeah.
Hey, all right, last one.
Becky, I appreciate you being here. I think your explanations are really clarifying. And I appreciate we had a private conversation earlier weeks ago. I appreciate the situation you're in with the other Basin states. And I had been wondering why the other two states are so, at least two of the states are so adamant. Yes, I think Jonathan answered that for me tonight. I hope you heard him. Especially here on the Yampa, that water goes to the green, and the beneficiaries of SCPP is in Utah. And so that tells you know, everyone's for sale, I guess. And so I think that's something to keep in mind. And I think so we need to be very careful about SCPP. And I would encourage you, we did it temporarily this year, but the old saying, there's nothing more permanent than temporary government. And once you start, be careful what you start.
Yeah, and thank goodness it's only there. It only went through a 2-year approval in Congress.
Yeah.
It had a 4 and it went down to 2. So
Do it another year, then there'll be a bigger push.
well, I'm hoping we'll be done with the
Money.
no. Well, if we can spend it on other good projects, that would be great. But I'm hoping we'll be done with potentially a Basin States alternative to be analyzed in the NEPA process, because that will take some pressure off of us.
So then, and then one last thing, and that, I'll go to your public relations.
Emily?
But, you know, we've called it natural curtailment, but the upper basin has lost the messaging battle up to this point on this Colorado River. As you said, every time you turn around, this Colorado River article, and the lower basin is winning that messaging to the American people that, 99% of people don't understand the overuse of the lower basin. And so I think one way, just as a thought, is through natural curtailment. And the priority system plus the water is just not there. In 2021, we should have had the message loud and clear, upper basin cuts 1 million acre feet, curtails 1 million acre feet out of their usage. Because we do, that system is tried and true.
And I'm gonna push back on you a little bit, because, that's the message we did give. That's why those numbers are public. Our numbers are generally not put out there. The reason we did that was to show that. The reason why Emily's here and says, give us your shortage stories, is because those are the stories we need to tell. The reason I tell the Ute Mountain Ute story of going to a 10% allocation in 2021 to a 40% allocation in 2022, having to fallow 90% of their lands, 90% of their sprinklers were off. Watching that community suffer, they had to lay off 50% of their staff for the bow and arrow ranch and farm. The reason I tell that story is because that's the story I've been told. So I need your stories. I absolutely need your stories about what shortage looks like. When we signed that 6-state letter that said you must apply EVAP and transit losses, the reason I was willing to sign it, it's not because of EVAP and transit losses, because if you look at the nuance of that letter, it acknowledges there are shortages in the upper basin on an annual basis. And that was the first time that the lower basin ever acknowledged that we take hydrologic shortages. The other piece in terms of the messaging, we have work to do on that. And we need, the way we do that is do it loudly together. And so on the messaging, the reason you are saying overuse, the reason the lower basin is even saying overuse, you might recall a term, structural deficit.
Yeah.
You might recall that term. Where do you think that term died? In Colorado. You know why? Because we said, screw off. We're not calling it structural deficit. That is too nice. We're going to call it what it is, and it's overuse. We said it first. And even now, the lower basin is starting to acknowledge that they are overusing. That has been a 2-year process. And so it takes time, it takes effort, but we absolutely need to continue. This is when I said we need to put our foot on the gas and not loosen up. I was shunned. People tried to get me fired. Lower basin people, the federal government called the governor when I started using the word overuse. When I called them out on their modeling to the Bureau of Reclamation and said, this is a bias to the lower basin, this is inaccurate, and called it out and said, use the best available science. People that were in the room, I happened to send that on a Friday at around 5. That we had a meeting on Monday, that was already planned with all the basin states and the feds. And nobody would look at me. I said, I get to bring my book because I was not acknowledged by anyone, not even someone in the upper basin. Because we called it what it is, and it is facts. And only now have people started to realize we absolutely have to do that. But that was at the beginning of this. There were 2 more years of dry hydrology before they started seeing the light.
I agree.
And so we called it out 2 years ago, and it wasn't fun. And the reason we were able to do it was because the Fed started calling the water users in the state and said, do you know what your crazy commissioner said? And they said, yeah. she told us, she's right. That was why I'm still standing here. And you have an SCIS that acknowledges the work has to come from the lower basin. Never, ever before have the federal government said, oh, we got to take cuts in the lower basin. This is where the problem is. They didn't look into the upper basin in that SCIS. And I don't, so the reason I push back a little bit is because we stepped out a lot to get us to this point. And doesn't mean we're gonna stop stepping out. It doesn't mean we don't have to step out more, but we have to absolutely do that together.
Darn, pushing back, I acknowledge that you've been on the right page and the messaging, but public messaging, I still think across the western United States, public messaging, and that's, if the feds step in, it will be based on on that. And the public messaging throughout is, well, you know, both, everybody's gonna have to cut.
Oh, I know, I heard it in I mentioned the Central Arizona Project meeting. And that was one of the things they said, was like, if this should be shared equally. If you also look at the nuance of the letters that went in response to post 2026 guidelines, they also said shared across the basin. They wouldn't say the word sustainable, and a whole basin approach, a whole system approach. And that's why that's why our 7-state letter was this long, was because I said, screw off, they want to put the upper basin reservoirs in as part of how releases are determined from how. And so that's been the ask. And so short letter, but it doesn't mean they're not going to sit and say, what's happening to our economy, this and that. They haven't taken a drop of shortage, really.
No.
And so we as people need to make sure our stories are getting out too. And that's why I said that the story I tell is the one I've been told. I need to say, I need you to tell me, this is from this conservancy district, this is what happened in 2021. This meant this many head of cattle. This meant this many jobs. This meant this to the environment. The temperature in the rivers went up this much. What does that do to the species? This is what happened on our forest. This is wildfire, what happened. Like, that's the stories I need. And that's where that's where that stuff comes in. That's what I need from you guys, because it is, this is going to be a messaging. This is going to be a political game. We are targeting our senators because that's where we have numbers. We're not targeting our Congress. Sorry. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Becky.
Okay, so I have some announcements. At the next meeting, we're gonna have elections for officers, chair, vice chair, White River, vice chair, Yampa. And then by my count, there's 11 Basin Roundtable seats that are going to be open, or terms are expiring, and that may or may not be right, but Sonia Macy's, Rat County Commissioner, Tom Gray, Moffett County Commissioner, Doug Overton, Rio Blanco County Commissioner, Julie Baxter, Route County Municipality, Stephen Hinkmeyer, Moffett County Municipality, Ken Brenner, Upper Yampa Conservancy District, Mike Camblin, Juniper Water Conservancy District, Sean Welder, Yellow Jacket Water Conservancy District, Jay Sheehan, Potok Water Conservancy District, and Rebecca Breezemore, Colorado River Water Conservation District, Callie Scritchfield, House Senate appointment, Madison Maxworthy, environmental appointment, and Will Myers agricultural appointment. I think that's all of them. And some of you are pretty recent. Were pretty recently appointed, so I don't I don't know if there's a problem with that. This is right off the Yampa-White-Green website, members list, and when terms are up. So we're gonna have to have elections at the start of the next meeting. We'll be electing a chair, 2 vice chairs, and a lot of these aren't elected positions. They're kind of appointed from the different conservancy districts and the different counties. So, but there are a few that will need to be elected.
When are applications due? That process.
Yeah, so I think, normally what's happened, Will, is before the packets go out, Alden's asked for letters of interest for the positions like them, but you know, the environmental and recreation and whatever. So, people will turn those in, people will turn in a letter of interest for being a vice chair. Potentially, they'll turn in a letter for wanting to be the chair or either of the vice chairs. Those get shared in the packet, and then we'll vote on those. But we'll have to do that because we'll essentially start the meeting without probably a quorum of members. We're really close to not having a quorum of members, so.
Will you be sending out some kind of electronic communication to let those folks know, because there could be half of the people you mentioned might have not been here at this meeting.
Yeah.
Will there be some communication that goes out to all those expiring?
We can you put something out, Patrick, that just says these seats need to be filled?
And so, yes, I'll send something out. And so if you're appointed, you need to have a letter from your appointment before the meeting, please.
Yeah.
You should know if you're appointed or elected.
This is a quick question. I'm assuming you already do this, but do we broadcast like publicly that people can apply?
Yes, I send out meeting notices and website and Facebook that here are the seats that are up for election.
Okay.
I do not publicize the seats that are up for appointment because should be up to the appointing entity. Does that make sense? Yeah.
We're stuck, huh?
Probably you need to include in that, we've got some rules set for how many come from the upper portion and the lower portion and the white portion.
Yes, yes.
Could you refresh us with those?
We cannot have more than 6 from one county. That's really, the bylaws for elections are not strong at all. We have who's elected and majority vote. Yes.
I apologize. I should have made this announcement during public comment, but it's on topic here. Rod Murphy of our board, recently resigned his post from the Yampa district, so right now currently not an open seat for this end of our district. So if you're interested in applying to get on the district, being called.
Okay.
From Milner West.
So our next meeting will be November 8th at 6 o'clock, likely in this very room. Motion to adjourn. Got a second. Second, okay. Motion in a second. All in favor, can leave.
Nice job.